Dad, my stomach hurts. Those 4 weak words whispered by my daughter were the bell that woke a sleeping dragon. When I lifted the hem of her silk blouse, I did not just see a bruise. I saw a death sentence signed by her husband. I saw needle marks hidden under layers of expensive concealer. I saw a method of killing that I had not seen since the streets of South Chicago ran red in the 90s. My son-in-law thought he was poisoning a helpless woman while her senile father watched. He did not know that he was forcing the Black Bishop to pick up his crown once more. Before I tell you how I made him pay for every drop of my daughter's pain, tell me in the comments if you have ever had to hide your true strength to protect someone you love. Like and subscribe if you believe justice is best served cold. My name is Bishop King. I am 68 years old, and to the world I am nothing but a retired school janitor with a bad knee and a pension that barely covers my coffee. I walk with a cane. I wear sweaters that have seen better decades. I keep my head down. That is the mask I crafted 20 years ago when I walked away from the life. But before the gray hair and the limp, they called me the Black Bishop. I controlled 6 city blocks of the toughest turf in Chicago, not with noise, but with silence and precision. I washed my hands of that blood for one reason: my daughter Aaliyah. I wanted her to have a life where the only thing she had to fear was a rainy day. I bought her a future with clean money I had washed for years. I bought her this mansion in the suburbs, though the deed is in her name, to keep her safe from my past. And what did my sacrifice buy her? It bought her a cage gilded in gold and a keeper named Hunter. The night of their 5th anniversary party, the air in the mansion was thick with the smell of expensive perfume and hypocrisy. Hunter, my son-in-law, stood in the center of the living room holding a glass of champagne that cost more than my first car. He is a tall man with the kind of blonde, polished looks that open doors in corporate America, but his eyes have always reminded me of a shark sensing blood in the water. He was laughing with his colleagues, boasting about the renovations he was planning for the house, my house, while I stood in the doorway of the kitchen holding a small gift box wrapped in brown paper. Hunter saw me. The smile didn't leave his face, but his eyes went cold. He walked over, placing a hand on my shoulder. The grip was too tight, digging into the muscle. "Look who decided to come out of the basement," he announced to his guests, his voice dripping with fake warmth. "Everyone. This is Bishop. We try to keep him comfortable downstairs, but he insists on mingling." The guests chuckled, a low, polite sound that stripped me of my dignity. Hunter leaned in close to my ear, his breath smelling of scotch and mint. "Get back in the kitchen, old man. You are ruining the aesthetic. You can eat the appetizers the catering staff brings back. Don't let me see you out here again until these people leave." I looked at him. My hand tightened on the cane. The old instinct, the one that calculates the angle to break a windpipe in less than a second, twitched in my right arm. But then I saw Aaliyah across the room. She looked thin, too thin. Her skin, usually the color of rich cocoa, was ash gray. She gave me a tiny, pleading shake of her head. For her, I swallowed the rage. I lowered my eyes like a beaten dog and turned back to the kitchen. I sat on a metal stool eating cold bruschetta off a paper napkin. The sound of jazz and laughter drifted in from the other room. I was the man who once sat at tables where mayors and judges waited for me to speak before they took a sip of water. Now I was eating leftovers in a house I paid for, hiding from a man who owed his entire lifestyle to my silence. The double doors swung open. A waiter rushed in with a tray of empty glasses, followed by Aaliyah. She was carrying a fresh bottle of red wine. Her hands were shaking. I watched her from my corner. She was trying to uncork the bottle, but her grip was weak. The corkscrew slipped. The bottle tipped. Red wine splashed across the front of her cream-colored dress and onto the sleeve of Hunter's pristine white shirt as he walked in to check on the drinks. The music seemed to stop. Hunter looked at the stain on his cuff. Then he looked at Aaliyah. He didn't yell. That would have been too human. He just stared at her with a dead, flat expression that was infinitely worse. "You clumsy, useless thing," he hissed, his voice low so the guests wouldn't hear. "You can't do anything right, can you? Look at you. You are a mess." Aaliyah flinched. It was a physical reaction, a muscle memory of pain. "I am sorry, Hunter," she stammered, reaching for a towel. "I just felt dizzy." He grabbed her wrist. His fingers were like a vice. "Dizzy. You are always dizzy. You are always sick. It is embarrassing, Aaliyah. You are embarrassing me." He squeezed. I saw a tear leak from her eye. "Let her go, Hunter." My voice was raspy, but it carried across the kitchen tiles. Hunter turned to look at me, surprised that the furniture had spoken. "Go back to your soup, old man," he sneered. "This is between my wife and me." Aaliyah gasped, her knees buckling. She slumped against the counter, clutching her side. "Dad," she whispered, the sound barely more than a breath. "Dad, my stomach hurts." It wasn't a stomach ache. I know the sound of a stomach ache. This was the sound of organs failing. This was the sound of a body screaming. I moved. For a man of 68 with a bad knee, I moved faster than Hunter expected. I was between them in a heartbeat. I caught Aaliyah before she hit the floor. She was burning up her skin, radiating a sickly heat. "Where does it hurt, baby?" I asked, my hands gentle on her shoulders. She couldn't speak. She just pointed to her left side, just below the ribs. Her dress was ruined anyway. I didn't ask for permission. I pulled the fabric of her blouse up to see the skin. What I saw stopped my heart. There was a bruise on her ribs. It wasn't a fresh purple. It was the sickly yellow-green of an injury that had been inflicted days ago and re-injured repeatedly. But the shape was distinct. It was oval with a flat top. I looked at Hunter's left hand. He wore a heavy gold signet ring, a family heirloom he bragged about constantly. The bruise was a perfect stamp of that ring, but that wasn't what made my blood run cold. Lower down near her navel, the skin was mottled. I leaned closer, squinting my eyes. There were tiny dots, puncture marks, dozens of them. They were incredibly small, like the bite of a mosquito, and they had been carefully covered with heavy makeup that was now smearing under her sweat. I touched the skin. It was hard, lumpy, lipodystrophy, the thickening of fat tissue caused by repeated injections in the same spot. I froze. Memories from 30 years ago crashed into the present. The South Side, 1995. We had a problem with a snitch. We couldn't shoot him. It would bring too much heat. My associate, a man we called the chemist, suggested a different route. Insulin. High doses of insulin injected into a non-diabetic. It causes hypoglycemia, confusion, weakness, dizziness, and eventually a coma that looks exactly like natural causes or a metabolic failure. We called it the sweet death. Aaliyah was not diabetic. I looked up at Hunter. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Aaliyah's exposed skin, and for a split second the mask slipped. I saw panic. Not concern for his wife, but the panic of a criminal who realizes he left the evidence out in the open. "What are you doing?" Hunter barked, shoving my hand away and pulling Aaliyah's dress down roughly. "You perverted old fool. Don't touch her. She has needle marks, Hunter," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Why does my daughter have needle marks on her stomach?" Hunter laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "You are senile, Bishop. Those are from her vitamin shots. We have a wellness doctor who comes in. She has been so frail lately, we are trying to boost her immunity. Vitamins." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver case. He popped it open. Inside was a single pill. It was vivid blue, unlike any vitamin I had ever seen. "Here, honey," he said, forcing the pill toward Aaliyah's mouth. "You missed your evening dose. That is why you are feeling sick. Take this and you will feel better in no time." "No," I said. I grabbed his wrist. My grip was not the grip of a janitor. It was the grip of a man who used to break fingers for lying. Hunter looked at me, shocked by the strength in my old hands. "Don't give her that, I warned." "You stay out of this," Hunter yelled. He used his free hand to shove me. He was 35 in his prime, gym fit. I was 68. I stumbled back, my bad knee giving way, and I hit the floor hard. My hips screamed in pain, but my eyes never left the pill. The jolt had knocked it from Hunter's hand. It skittered across the kitchen tile, spinning like a blue coin, and landed near the leg of the prep table. Hunter looked down at me with pure disgust. "Look at you," he spat. "Weak. Pathetic. You are lucky I let you live under my roof. If you ever put your hands on me again, I will throw you into the street tonight. Do you hear me? I will put you in a state home so fast your head will spin." He turned back to Aaliyah, who was leaning against the counter, tears streaming down her face, eyes glazed and confused. "Where's the pill?" he muttered, scanning the floor. I saw it. It was 3 feet from my hand. I knew I had seconds. I let out a groan of pain, clutching my knee, playing the part of the frail old man he believed I was. I dragged myself across the floor, making a show of trying to stand up, using the table leg for support. "Get up, you embarrassment," Hunter sneered, turning his back to me to grab a glass of water for Aaliyah. In that second of blindness, my hand shot out. I grabbed the blue pill. With a movement practiced 1,000 times with dice and coins in the back rooms of gambling dens, I I palmed it and simultaneously dropped a white breath mint I always kept in my pocket onto the floor in its place. "There it is," I wheezed, pointing to the white mint. Hunter turned back. He saw the white pill. He frowned for a fraction of a second, but the lighting in the kitchen was dim and his adrenaline was high. He didn't question it. He snatched up the mint. "Open up, Aaliyah," he ordered. He put the mint in her mouth and forced her to drink the water. She swallowed, choking slightly. "Good girl," he said, stroking her hair with a terrifying tenderness. "Go upstairs and lie down. I will tell everyone you have a migraine." He looked down at me, still on the floor. "And you. Stay here. If you come out, I will tell the guests you attacked her in a fit of dementia. I have the papers ready, Bishop. One call to Dr. Kane and you are locked up. Try me." He guided Aaliyah out of the kitchen. I watched them go, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I waited until the door swung shut. I sat up. The pain in my knee was real, but the fire in my gut was hotter. I opened my left hand. There, resting in my palm, was the blue pill. Small, innocent-looking, deadly. I carefully wrapped it in a piece of tissue and placed it deep in my pocket. Hunter thought he had won. He thought he had silenced the witness and medicated the victim. He thought he was the apex predator in this house. He had no idea that he had just handed the murder weapon to the only man in Chicago who knew exactly how to use it to hang him. I stood up, using my cane to steady myself. I didn't go to the basement. I walked to the back door, stepping out into the cool night air. I needed a phone that wasn't tapped. I needed resources. I walked 3 blocks to a gas station payphone, a relic that most people ignored. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 20 years. It rang twice. "Hello," a gravelly voice answered. "Silas," I said. "It's the Bishop." There was a long silence on the other end. Then the sound of a chair scraping back. "I thought you were retired, Bishop." "I was," I said, watching the lights of my daughter's house in the distance. "But the rats are back in the kitchen. Dust off the old toolkit, Silas. We have work to do." I hit the floor hard, and the impact sent a shockwave of pain through my bad hip that nearly made me black out. The cold kitchen tiles bit into my cheek as I lay there gasping for air, but my eyes never left that blue pill. It was spinning like a deadly top across the grout lines, moving away from me and towards the base of the refrigerator. Hunter stood over me, his chest heaving with a mixture of rage and adrenaline, looking down at the father-in-law he considered nothing more than a piece of unwanted furniture. He turned his back to me for a split second to grab a glass of water from the dispenser on the fridge door, convinced that I was too old and too broken to make a move. That was his first mistake. In the underworld of 1990s, Chicago, you did not survive by being the strongest man in the room. You survived by being the fastest. My muscles remembered what my mind had tried to forget. I did not think. I reacted. My hand shot out with the speed of a striking cobra. I snatched the blue pill from the floor just as it stopped spinning. In the same fluid motion, my thumb flicked a white breath mint from my palm. I always kept them in my pocket to mask the smell of cheap tobacco. The mint skittered onto the floor and landed in the exact spot where the poison had been. It was a sleight of hand I had practiced 1,000 times with dice in back-alley craps games, a trick designed to deceive the eye and change the odds. I slid the blue pill into my pocket and curled into a ball, clutching my knee and letting out a low, pathetic moan just as Hunter turned back around. He did not see the switch. He only saw a broken old man writhing on the floor and a small white tablet resting near his foot. He did not look closely. Why would he? To him, I was incapable of such dexterity. He scooped up the mint with an impatient grunt and turned to Aaliyah, who was leaning against the counter, her face pale and covered in a sheen of cold sweat. "Open your mouth, Aaliyah," he ordered, his voice dropping to that terrifyingly gentle tone he used when he wanted to control her. She looked at him with glassy eyes, too weak to fight, too conditioned to disobey. She opened her mouth. I watched my heart hammering against my ribs as he placed the mint on her tongue and lifted the glass of water to her lips. "Drink it. All of it." She swallowed. I saw the muscles in her throat work, and for the first time in an hour, I allowed myself to breathe. She was safe. For tonight, she was safe. It was just sugar and peppermint, not the chemical cocktail he had intended to use to stop her heart. Hunter looked down at me, a sneer curling his lip. "Get up, Bishop. You are pathetic." I groaned again, making a show of trying to find purchase on the slippery floor. I needed him to believe I was helpless. I needed him to believe he had won. Just then, the double doors to the living room swung open. The noise of the commotion had traveled. 3 guests stood there holding champagne flutes. their faces masks of confusion and concern. It was a middle-aged couple from Hunter's firm and a woman I recognized as one of the neighbors. "Oh my God," the neighbor gasped, looking from me on the floor to Aaliyah leaning against the counter. "What happened? Is everything all right?" Hunter did not miss a beat. He was a natural predator, able to shift his camouflage in an instant. His face transformed from contempt to a look of deep, weary sorrow. He sighed, running a hand through his perfect blonde hair, and stepped between the guests and me as if trying to shield them from an ugly sight. "I am so sorry you had to see this," Hunter said, his voice trembling with fake emotion. "It is Bishop. He is having one of his episodes again." He gestured to me, still struggling to get to my knees. The guests stepped into the kitchen, their eyes wide with morbid curiosity. Hunter walked over to a drawer near the oven and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I knew that envelope. I had seen him working on papers in his study late at night, but I never knew what they were. Now, as he held them up like a shield, I understood. He attacked her. Hunter lied, the words flowing smooth as oil. He got confused. He thought Aaliyah was someone else. He started shouting about the old days, about money, and then he just shoved her. I had to restrain him. The lie was so bold, so monstrous, that for a second I could only stare at him. Aaliyah looked up, her eyes wide, trying to process the words through the fog of her illness. "No," she whispered, but her voice was too weak. Hunter drowned her out. "It is the dementia." Hunter continued, tapping the envelope against his hand. "We have been trying to keep it private. We wanted to protect his dignity. But it is getting worse. Dr. Kane signed the assessment last week. He has aggressive senile dementia with paranoid delusions. We were hoping to keep him home a little longer, but after tonight, I do not think it is safe for Aaliyah." He pulled a sheet of paper from the envelope and waved it slightly. It had a stamp and a signature. It looked official. It looked real. I realized then the depth of his planning. He had not just planned to kill my daughter. He had planned to bury me alive in the system. The guests looked down at me. Their expressions shifted from confusion to pity and then to revulsion. They saw a man in worn-out clothes muttering on the floor while his successful, handsome son-in-law held the proof of his insanity. "Oh, you poor thing," the neighbor said, reaching out to touch Hunter's arm. "It must be so hard for you taking care of him like this. You are a saint, Hunter. Most people would have put him in a home years ago." "It is a burden," Hunter said, casting a sad look at me. "But he is family, or at least he was. But I cannot let him hurt my wife. Look at her. She is terrified." Aaliyah was terrified, but not of me. She was looking at Hunter with a dawning horror, but she was too sick to speak up, too drugged by days of his poison to form a coherent defense. I slowly pulled myself up, using the edge of the counter. My knees screamed in protest, but I forced my legs to hold my weight. I stood there, leaning heavily on my cane, looking at the circle of judging faces. They were the jury, and Hunter was the executioner. Bishop Hunter said, his voice hard, now authoritative. "Go to your room, now. Do not make me call the orderlies." He wanted me to scream. He wanted me to deny it. He wanted me to shout that he was a liar and a thief, because that is exactly what a paranoid, demented old man would do. It would prove his point. It would seal my fate. If I fought him now in front of these witnesses, he would have the justification he needed to have me committed tonight. So I did nothing. I let my shoulders slump. I let my jaw go slack. I lowered my eyes to the floor, playing the part he had written for me. I became the confused, broken old man they all believed I was. "I am sorry," I mumbled, slurring my words slightly. "I just wanted some water." The victory in Hunter's eyes was absolute. He thought he had broken me. He thought the Black Bishop was dead and buried, replaced by this shell. "Go," he said, pointing to the back door. I turned and walked away. I could feel their eyes on my back burning with judgment. I heard the neighbor whisper loudly as I pushed through the swinging door. "It is so sad when they lose their minds. You really need to think about a facility, Hunter, for your own safety." I walked through the mudroom and out the back door into the cool night air. The rain had started to fall, a cold, steady drizzle that soaked through my thin sweater instantly. I didn't stop. I didn't go to the basement room they had assigned to me like a dog. I kept walking, my cane clicking rhythmically on the wet pavement of the driveway. I walked past the manicured lawns of the neighbors, past the security gates of the subdivision. I walked until the lights of the mansion were just aglow in the distance. The cold should have bothered me, but I didn't feel it. My mind was miles away and decades in the past. The year was 1995. I was facing a turf war with the encroaching cartel from the north. They were younger, hungrier, and they had more firepower. They thought I was getting old. They thought I was weak, so I let them believe it. For 3 months I played the fool. I started rumors that I was losing my mind. I let them see me talking to myself in public. I let them see me shaking. I let them get comfortable. I let them think the throne was empty. And when they gathered in one room to divide my territory, confident that the old lion was toothless, I locked the doors from the outside and burned the building to the ground. I learned a valuable lesson that year. The greatest camouflage in the world is your enemy's arrogance. If they think you are nothing, they will never see the knife coming until it is buried in their chest. Hunter had just made the same mistake the cartel made. He had mistaken silence for surrender. He had mistaken patience for weakness. I reached the old gas station on the edge of the neighborhood. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering in the rain. I stepped into the phone booth, the plastic shielding me from the wind. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a quarter. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. I dialed the number from memory. It was a number that hadn't existed for 20 years, a ghost line that routed through 3 different servers before ringing in a basement apartment in the city. It rang once, twice, then a click. "Yeah," a voice answered. It was rough like sandpaper on concrete. Silas, my oldest friend, my consigliere, the only man who knew where all the bodies were buried because he had helped me dig the holes. "It is me," I said. There was a pause. "Bishop, I heard you were playing house in the suburbs. The game has changed, Silas," I said, my voice dropping an octave, shedding the tremble of the old man. "I need you to open the vault." "Which one?" Silas asked. "The black one," I said. I heard Silas take a sharp breath. "We haven't touched that since '99. That is the nuclear option, Bishop." I looked at the blue pill wrapped in tissue in my other hand. I thought about the needle marks on my daughter's stomach. I thought about the fake medical papers Hunter had waved in front of his guests. "They poisoned Aaliyah," I said. The line went dead silent, the kind of silence that precedes a storm. "Where are you?" Silas asked, his voice cold and flat. "I am at the Shell station on 4th. Come get me." And Silas, "Yeah, Bishop, bring the suit. The gray one, and bring the car, not the sedan, the Phantom." "You are activating Ghost Protocol," Silas stated. It wasn't a question. "I am," I replied, watching a police cruiser roll slowly past the gas station, unaware that the most dangerous man in the state was standing 10 feet away. "The janitor is dead." "Silas, the bishop is back." I hung up the phone and stood in the rain waiting. I wasn't cold anymore. I felt a fire in my chest that I hadn't felt in 20 years. Hunter wanted a war. He wanted to play games with medicine and laws and paper. He didn't know that he was playing checkers, and I had just flipped the board. He thought he was dealing with a senile old man. He was about to find out what happens when you wake up a monster. The morning sun did not bring warmth to the cold gray stone of the mansion. It only served to illuminate the dust motes dancing in the stagnant air of a house that had become a prison. I was in the kitchen engaging in the menial task of scrubbing the previous night's dishes because Hunter had fired the cleaning lady 3 weeks ago. He claimed it was to save money, but I knew the truth. He did not want witnesses. He did not want anyone to see the slow decay of his wife or the bruises that bloomed on her skin like dark flowers. At 9 o'clock sharp, the front door opened. I heard the heavy tread of Hunter's designer loafers on the marble entryway, followed by a shuffling, uneven step that sounded like a rat skittering across a hardwood floor. "Bishop, get in here!" Hunter shouted. His voice echoed through the high ceiling, stripping away any peace the morning might have offered. I dried my hands on a rag and walked slowly into the living room. My limp was exaggerated today, a calculated weakness to lower their guard. Aaliyah was sitting on the beige sofa, wrapped in a thick wool blanket despite the thermostat being set to 75 degrees. She looked smaller than she had the day before. Her eyes were sunken dark hollows in a face that had lost its light. Hunter stood by the fireplace, looking like the lord of the manor. Beside him stood a man who made my skin crawl. He was short and balding with a face that looked like it had been eroded by years of bad choices. He wore a white lab coat that was slightly too large for him and carried a battered black medical bag. "This is Dr. Kane Hunter," announced, gesturing to the little man. "He is a specialist I brought in to handle Aaliyah's condition since her regular doctor is clearly incompetent." I looked at the man. I looked past the cheap glasses and the nervous tick in his left eye. I looked past the years of grime and aging, and I recognized him. It was 1992. I was sitting in the back of a jazz club on the south side when my enforcers dragged a young man in. He had been selling tainted product to kids in my territory. Bad stuff, cut with battery acid. We called him Cain back then, too, but he wasn't a doctor. He was a bottom feeder, a parasite who preyed on the desperate. I had broken his nose and exiled him from the city, telling him that if I ever saw his face again, he would end up in the bottom of the lake. And now here he was, standing in my daughter's living room, wearing a stethoscope like a costume. He did not recognize me. Why would he? The Black Bishop was a myth, a ghost story from a past life. To him I was just an old servant with a bad leg. But I knew him. I knew that a man who sold poison to children 30 years ago had not suddenly developed a conscience. He was here to finish the job that the blue pill had failed to do. Dr. Cain is going to administer a new treatment, Hunter said, his eyes daring me to speak. It is a powerful sedative to help her sleep through the pain. Aaliyah looked up at me with terror in her eyes. Dad, she whispered, I do not want any shots. Please. It is for your own good, honey, Hunter said, stroking her hair. You are hysterical. You need to calm down. Dr. Cain opened his bag. His hands were shaking slightly. He pulled out a syringe. It was already filled with a clear, viscous liquid. There was no label on the vial, no sterile packaging, just a loaded weapon in the hands of a killer. Bishop, go make us some tea, Hunter ordered. And do not mess it up this time. I nodded, keeping my head down. Yes, sir, I mumbled. I shuffled back to the kitchen. My mind was racing. I could not let that needle touch my daughter. If that liquid entered her veins, she would never wake up. I knew Cain's work. He did not believe in half measures. I put the kettle on the stove. The blue flame hissed to life. I watched the water boil my own blood, matching its temperature. I needed a weapon, but I could not use violence. Not yet. If I broke Cain's neck right now, Hunter would call the police, and I would be the violent dementia patient who murdered a doctor. I would be locked away, and Aaliyah would be left alone with them. I had to be smarter. I had to be the clumsy old man they believed I was. I prepared a tray, 3 porcelain cups, a ceramic pot filled with boiling water. I did not add tea leaves. I needed the water scalding hot. I arranged the cups precariously on the tray, leaving them loose and rattling. I walked back into the living room. Cain was bending over Aaliyah. He had rolled up the sleeve of her sweater, exposing her thin arm. He was tapping the vein. Aaliyah was sobbing quietly, turning her head away into the cushions. Hunter was watching with a hungry intensity, his eyes fixed on the needle. Hold still, Cain muttered. This will just be a little pinch. I moved forward. I let my right foot catch on the edge of the area rug. It was a move I had used to hustle pool games in my youth, pretending to be drunk to raise the bets. I stumbled. Whoops! I cried out, my voice cracking. I lurched forward. I did not try to regain my balance. I threw my weight into the fall. I swung the tray outward. The teapot flew through the air. It was a perfect arc. The ceramic lid shattered against Hunter's knee, but the pot itself and its boiling contents collided directly with Dr. Cain's outstretched hand. The water splashed over his wrist and the back of his hand just as he was about to insert the needle. Cain screamed. It was a high-pitched wail of pain. He jerked his hand back violently. The syringe flew from his grip, spinning through the air and landing under the armchair in the corner of the room. You stupid old fool, Hunter roared. Jumping back to avoid the splashing water, I crashed to the floor amidst the broken porcelain and puddles of hot water. I lay there groaning, clutching my chest, acting the part of the frail senior who had taken a bad fall. I am sorry, I wheezed. My foot! I caught my foot! Dr. Cain was jumping around, holding his scalded hand, his face red with agony. He burned me. The old crazy man burned me. Look at my hand! Get out! Hunter yelled at him. Go to the bathroom and run it under cold water. Cain fled the room, whimpering. Hunter turned his eyes on me. The mask was gone. There was no pretense of civility now. There was only pure, unadulterated hatred. You did that on purpose, Hunter hissed. He stepped over the mess on the floor. He reached down and grabbed the front of my sweater, hauling me up to my knees. He was strong, fueled by rage, but I let him manhandle me. I had to maintain the illusion. No, Hunter. Please, I begged, raising my hands in a pathetic gesture of defense. It was an accident. Liar, he shouted. He drew back his hand and struck me. It was a backhand, hard and fast. His heavy signet ring caught me on the cheekbone. The skin split. I felt the warm rush of blood and the sharp sting of impact. My head snapped to the side and I tasted copper in my mouth. Dad Aaliyah screamed. She tried to stand up to come to me, but she was too weak. She fell back onto the sofa, sobbing hysterically. "Hunter, stop it. Please stop it. You are hurting him. He is ruining everything." Hunter yelled at her, not letting go of my sweater. "He is a menace. He is dangerous, Aaliyah. Look at what he did. He attacked the doctor." I hung in his grip, limp and defeated, letting the blood drip from my face onto his expensive hardwood floor. I looked at Aaliyah. Her eyes were filled with horror and shame. She wanted to help me. I could see it. But the fear of her husband was a chain around her neck. She curled into a ball, covering her ears, crying helplessly. Hunter shoved me backward. I hit the floor again near the armchair. "Clean this up," Hunter spat. "Clean up this mess, and then get out of my sight. If you are not in the basement in 5 minutes, I will drag you there myself." He turned his back on me, walking over to the sofa to loom over Aaliyah, whispering harsh threats into her ear to silence her crying. I slowly pushed myself up. My cheek was throbbing and my knee was on fire, but my mind was clear. I reached into my pocket for a rag I kept there, ostensibly for cleaning my glasses. I began to wipe up the water moving on my hands and knees. I crawled toward the armchair. Hunter was distracted bullying my daughter. I reached under the chair. My fingers brushed against cold plastic. I grabbed the syringe. In one smooth motion, I slipped it into my sock, hiding it beneath the fabric of my trousers. I had the weapon. I had the evidence. I finished wiping the floor, moving with the agonizing slowness of the elderly. I stood up, leaning on my cane, and limped out of the room. I did not look at Hunter. I did not look at Aaliyah. I could not bear to see her broken spirit, knowing I had to leave her there with him for a few more hours. I went to the basement. It was a finished room, but it smelled of damp earth and neglect. I sat on the narrow bed and pulled the syringe from my sock. I wrapped it carefully in a handkerchief and placed it inside the hollow heel of my spare work boot, a hiding spot I had created weeks ago. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a burner phone, simple and untraceable, given to me by Silas the night before. I flipped it open. There was a text message. It read simply, "Arsenic and scopolamine, lethal dose." The blue pill was a ticket to the morgue. I closed the phone. My hand formed a fist. Arsenic, a slow, painful death that mimics food poisoning. And scopolamine, the devil's breath, a drug that turns people into obedient zombies, stripping them of their free will. It all made sense. The confusion, the weakness, the compliance. Hunter wasn't just killing her body. He was erasing her mind so she would sign whatever he put in front of her before she died. I touched the cut on my cheek. The pain was a sharp reminder of the stakes. Hunter had drawn first blood. He thought he was disciplining a dog. He did not know he had just slapped the devil. I stood up and walked to the small basement window. I could see the tires of Dr. Kane's car as he sped away from the house. He would be back. Or someone else would. Hunter was desperate. He had debts. I could smell the desperation on him like cheap cologne. Tonight he would try again. Tonight he would try to force her hand. I checked the time. It was noon. The game was escalating. I needed to be ready. I took a deep breath, centering myself, pushing the pain into a small box in the back of my mind. The janitor took the punch. The janitor wiped the floor. But tonight the Black Bishop would set the table. The sun had set hours ago, leaving the mansion wrapped in a suffocating darkness that felt heavy with intent. I stood in the hallway shadows, watching through the crack of the study door as Hunter enacted the next stage of his plan. The air smelled of stale scotch and expensive leather, but underneath it all was the metallic tang of fear. My daughter Aaliyah sat slumped in the high-backed chair behind the mahogany desk. She looked like a broken doll. Her head lolled to one side and her eyes were unfocused, swimming in the chemical haze of the scopolamine Dr. Kane had likely administered before he fled. She was conscious, but she was not present. She was a vessel waiting for a command. Hunter paced behind her, vibrating with a manic energy. He held a Mont Blanc pen in one hand and a stack of crisp legal documents in the other. These were not medical forms. Even from this distance, I recognized the dense formatting of property deeds and irrevocable trust transfers. This was the endgame. The $5 million trust fund I had set up for Aaliyah was the prize, and the house was the cherry on top. Hunter needed liquid assets, and he needed them tonight. Sign it, Aaliyah. Hunter commanded, his voice tight with impatience. He slammed the papers down in front of her. Just sign the bottom line and you can go to sleep. Aaliyah blinked slowly, trying to focus on the paper. "Dad," she mumbled, her words slurring like a drunkard. "Where is Dad?" "Forget him," Hunter snapped, grabbing her shoulder and shaking her. "He is sleeping. He does not care about you. I am the only one who takes care of you. Now pick up the pen." I watched my daughter's trembling hand reach out. Her fingers could barely grasp the pen. She was fighting the drugs, fighting the exhaustion, but the scopolamine stripped away her will, leaving her suggestible and compliant. It was painful to watch. The little girl I had protected from the ugly truths of my world was now being flayed alive by a man she had promised to love. Hunter guided her hand to the paper. "Right here," he hissed. "Sign your name. Transfer the rights. It is for our future baby. Do it for us." I gripped the door frame, my knuckles turning white. If she signed those papers, Hunter would have everything he needed. Once the assets were transferred, Aaliyah would become disposable. He would stage her suicide or an accidental overdose within the week. I could burst in there. I could shatter his kneecaps with my cane. But then what? The police would come. I would be the violent father and he would be the victim. He would still have the power of attorney he had likely forged. No. I needed to break his hold on her legally and permanently. I needed to turn his greed into a noose. I backed away from the door, moving silently on the plush carpet. I could not stop the signing by force, so I had to stop it by circumstance. I needed chaos. I needed darkness. I made my way to the basement door. My bad knee ached with every step, a constant reminder of my age, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins sharpened my senses. I descended the stairs into the cool concrete belly of the house. The main breaker panel was located in the utility room next to the furnace. I knew this house better than Hunter ever would. I had reviewed the blueprints before I bought it for them, ensuring the wiring was up to code and the foundation was solid. I opened the gray metal box. Rows of black switches stared back at me. I could just flip the main breaker, but that was too simple. Hunter would just flip it back. I needed a failure that required a professional to fix. I needed a failure that smelled like danger. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small multi-tool I had retrieved from my old kit. I located the main input cables, thick black snakes carrying 200 amps of current. I did not cut them, that would be suicide. Instead, I looked for the ground wire and the neutral bar. I loosened the screw holding the neutral wire just enough so it would arc. Then I took a piece of copper wire I found on the workbench and bridged the connection between the main lighting circuit and the metal casing of the box, creating a direct short. I closed the panel door and stepped back. I raised my cane and struck the side of the box hard, jarring the loose connection. The reaction was instantaneous. There was a loud pop, like a gunshot, followed by the angry hiss of electricity arcing. A shower of blue sparks rained down from the bottom of the box, illuminating the dark basement in stroboscopic flashes. The smell of burning ozone and melting plastic filled the air instantly. Upstairs, the lights didn't just flicker, they died. The hum of the refrigerator, the whir of the HVAC system, the ambient noise of the modern home all vanished into a sudden, absolute silence. Then the backup alarm system kicked in. It was a piercing, wailing siren designed to wake the dead, powered by its own battery backup. It screamed through the house, disorienting and loud. I smiled in the darkness. Phase 1 was complete. Now I had to move. I navigated the basement in pitch blackness, counting my steps. 13 steps to the stairs, 12 steps up. I moved faster than I should have, ignoring the protest of my joints. I reached the top of the stairs and slipped into the hallway. The house was a cavern of noise and shadow. "Hunter," I heard Aaliyah scream from the study, her voice thin and terrified. "Stay there!" Hunter roared, his voice cracking with panic. "I cannot see a thing. Where is my phone?" He was stumbling around the study, knocking over books and crashing into furniture. He was a creature of comfort, and without power he was helpless. I, on the other hand, had spent half my life operating in the dark. I knew how to see without light. I knew how to move through the negative space. I reached into the inside pocket of my cardigan. I pulled out a thick manila folder. It was identical in weight and texture to the one Hunter had placed on the desk. Silas had prepared it hours ago, working with a contact in the court clerk's office. Inside was not a property transfer. It was a fast-tracked divorce filing citing adultery and attempted murder, along with a complete renunciation of marital assets signed by me as her witness. I slipped into the study. The alarm was deafening, masking the sound of my footsteps. Hunter was on the other side of the room, cursing and fumbling for his smartphone. Aaliyah was still in the chair, sobbing into her hands, paralyzed by fear. I moved to the desk. I could smell the ink on the papers Hunter had laid out. I felt the edge of the desk with my hip. My hand swept over the surface. I found his stack of documents. In one smooth motion, I slid his folder off the desk and tucked it under my arm simultaneously, placing my folder in the exact same spot. It took less than 2 seconds. The swap was seamless. Just as I stepped back into the shadows of the bookshelf, Hunter's phone flashlight beam cut through the darkness. The beam swept across the room, illuminating Aaliyah's terrified face and the desk. "It is just a power outage," Hunter yelled over the siren, trying to regain control. "The alarm is malfunctioning. Stay calm." He rushed back to the desk, breathless and sweating. He shone the light on the papers. He did not read them. He was too agitated, too focused on the end goal. He just saw the signature line at the bottom of the page. He saw the X where she needed to sign. His arrogance blinded him. He assumed that because he was the only one in the room with power, he was the only one with control. "Sign it," he shouted, shoving the pen back into Aaliyah's hand. "We need to get out of here. The house is not safe. Sign it and we go." Aaliyah was trembling so hard the desk shook. "I cannot see," she cried. Hunter directed the beam of light onto the paper, blindingly bright against the white page. "Just sign your name, Aaliyah. Right now." I watched from 5 feet away, hidden by the bulk of a tall bookcase. I held my breath. This was the hinge upon which the future swung. If she read the header, she would stop. If she saw the word divorce, she might wake up. But the scopolamine held her fast. She just wanted the noise to stop. She just wanted the yelling to end. She gripped the pen. She lowered the tip to the paper. I watched the ink flow. She wrote her name. Aaliyah King. Not Aaliyah King Bishop. Just King. It was a sign whether she knew it or not. She was reclaiming herself. She signed the first page, then the second. Hunter flipped them rapidly, not looking at the text, just pointing to the lines. "Done!" Hunter exclaimed, snatching the papers away the moment the pen lifted. He shoved them into his briefcase and snapped the lock shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the room. He thought he had just secured a fortune. He thought he had just stolen $5 million in a mansion. He had no idea he had just legally severed his tie to the money and documented his own removal from her life. He grabbed Aaliyah by the arm, hauling her up. "Come on," he said, dragging her toward the door. "We are leaving." He shone the light around the room. "Where is the old man?" he muttered. "Bishop. Bishop, where are you?" I stepped deeper into the shadows, pressing myself against the wall. I let my breathing slow. I became part of the room. "Forget him," Hunter said, pulling Aaliyah into the hallway. "Let him burn if the house is on fire. We have what we need." I watched them go. The beam of his flashlight bobbed down the hallway toward the front door. The front door slammed shut and the house was plunged back into darkness save for the strobe of the alarm. I walked to the desk and sat in the chair my daughter had just vacated. I was exhausted. My body felt like it was made of lead and broken glass. But I felt a cold, grim satisfaction settling in my chest. The devil had asked for a signature and he got one, but he forgot to check the contract. I pulled out my burner phone. The screen glowed blue in the dark. I dialed Silas. "It is done," I said when he answered. "He has the papers." "Did he read them?" Silas asked. "No," I replied. "He was too busy counting his money. He is heading to his car. He is going to meet the Russians." "Good," Silas said. "The Russians are expecting a payment. When he opens that briefcase and shows them divorce papers instead of a property deed, they are going to be very disappointed." "That is the point," I said, standing up. I walked to the window and watched the taillights of Hunter's car disappear down the driveway. He was driving toward his doom, thinking he was driving toward his salvation. "Now," I said to the empty room, "it is time to fix the lights. I have a meeting to prepare for, and I do not want to be sitting in the dark when the screams start." I adjusted the volume on the small beige device tucked behind my right ear. To the world, it looked like a standard-issue hearing aid for a man whose senses were dulling with age. Hunter often mocked it, raising his voice to a shout whenever he spoke to me, assuming I was half-deaf. He did not know that the device was a military-grade amplifier capable of picking up a whisper from 3 rooms away. I sat in the darkened living room, the power now restored, but the lights kept low. Through the French doors, I watched Hunter pacing on the stone balcony. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and cold. He held his phone to his ear with a white-knuckled grip, his posture radiating a frantic desperation that he hid well when he was indoors. I closed my eyes and focused on the feed. The audio was crystal clear. "Please listen to me," Hunter was saying, his voice cracking. "I have the papers. She signed them. I just need a few days to liquidate the assets. The transfer takes time. There was a silence on the line while the person on the other end spoke. I could not hear the other voice, but I could infer the threat from the way Hunter's shoulders hunched. No, you cannot do that, Hunter pleaded. I promise you getting the money is not the problem. I lost the crypto wallet key, but I found another source. My wife. She is sick. Very sick. It is a tragedy, really. She is not going to last the week. My hand tightened on the armrest of the chair. He was selling my daughter's life to buy himself time. $2 million, Hunter continued. I know the debt. I know the interest. Once she is gone, the insurance pays out double indemnity for accidental death plus the trust fund. You will get every cent. Just call off the dogs for 48 hours. He listened again. Then he nodded as if the person could see him. Yes, and the old man. Do not worry about him. He is a vegetable. I am handling him tonight. He won't be a problem by morning. It will look like a fall. Old people fall all the time. Their bones are brittle. Hunter hung up the phone and leaned against the railing, taking deep, shuddering breaths. I sat in the dark processing the intel. $2 million. That was the price of my daughter's life. He had gambled away money he did not have on volatile markets, and now he was drowning. The Russians he was dealing with were not the old guard. They were young, violent, and impatient. They did not care about trust funds or probate courts. They wanted cash or blood. Hunter straightened his jacket, fixed his hair in the reflection of the glass door, and walked back inside. He saw me sitting in the chair and offered a tight fake smile. Bishop, he said, I have to go out for a while, a late work emergency. You hold down the fort. He walked to the front door, but he did not lock it. I heard the distinct click of the latch failing to engage. He was leaving the door open. He was inviting the wolves in. Good night, Hunter, I said, my voice raspy and weak. Sleep tight, old man, he replied. He left. I watched his headlights sweep across the driveway and disappear down the street. He was building his alibi. He would be seen at a bar or a late-night diner on camera surrounded by witnesses while I had my tragic accident. I did not move from the chair. I waited. The house settled into silence. An hour passed, then 2. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed midnight. Then I heard it. The soft crunch of gravel outside, the squeak of a rubber sole on the porch, the front door pushed open slowly, the hinges protesting with a low whine. I stood up. I picked up my cane. It was a simple-looking thing made of polished hickory, but I had modified it years ago. The core was filled with lead shot, adding 3 pounds of weight to the swing. It was perfectly balanced, a crushing weapon disguised as a crutch. I walked to the foyer. 2 figures stood in the entryway. They were dressed in black hoodies, their faces covered by ski masks. They were big, heavy-set men who moved with the clumsiness of hired muscle. They were not professionals. Professionals would have come in through the back. Professionals would have been silent. These were thugs paid to throw an old man down a flight of stairs. They saw me standing there. Well, look at this, the taller one said, his voice muffled by the mask. Grandpa is waiting up for us. This makes it easier, the second one grunted. He pulled a baton from his belt and slapped it against his palm. Hunter said to make it look like a fall, but he didn't say we couldn't soften him up first. They stepped forward, closing the distance. They saw a 68-year-old janitor with a bad knee. They saw prey. You should not be here, I said calmly. My voice was steady, devoid of the tremulous vibrato I used with Hunter. This is a private residence. The tall one laughed. It is retirement time, Grandpa. We are here to help you down the stairs. Head first. He lunged for me, reaching out with a gloved hand to grab my throat. The transition from old man to the black bishop took less than a heartbeat. I did not retreat. I stepped into his guard. I shifted my weight, dropping my center of gravity. My cane came up not as a support, but as an extension of my arm. I drove the heavy brass tip of the cane into the tall man's solar plexus. The air left his lungs in a wet explosion. He doubled over, his eyes bulging behind the mask. Before he could fall, I brought the handle of the cane down on his collarbone. There was a sickening crunch of bone snapping. He dropped to his knees, gasping for air that wouldn't come. The second man froze. His brain could not reconcile what his eyes were seeing. The frail victim had vanished, replaced by a machine of violence. He stammered, raising his baton. He swung at my head. It was a wide, telegraphed swing. Amateur. I ducked under the blow, my bad knee forgotten in the rush of combat. I swung the cane horizontally, targeting the side of his knee. The lead-weighted hickory connected with the joint. His leg buckled sideways at an unnatural angle. He screamed a high-pitched sound that echoed through the foyer. He fell, hitting the floor hard. His baton clattered away across the marble. I stood over him. I was not breathing hard. I was not shaking. I felt the cold clarity that had kept me alive for 40 years in the Chicago underworld. The second man tried to crawl away, dragging his ruined leg. "Who are you?" he wheezed, terror leaking from every pore. "You are supposed to be a cripple!" I stepped on his hand, pinning it to the floor. I applied pressure until he cried out. "I am the man who owns this house," I said, my voice low and terrible. I leaned down, getting close to his masked face. I grabbed his index finger, the one he had planned to use to push me. "You work for the Russians," I stated. It wasn't a question. He nodded, frantically desperate to appease me. Yes. Yes. Vlad. We work for Vlad." I pulled his finger back, just to the breaking point. "Go back to Vlad," I whispered. "Tell him the debt is not Hunter's anymore. Tell him the Black Bishop is buying the debt." The man's eyes widened. He knew the name. Even the young ones knew the legends. "The Bishop," he gasped. "You are dead. They said you died in '99. I snapped his finger. It made a sharp, dry pop like a twig. He screamed again, but I clamped a hand over his mouth, stifling the noise. "I am resurrected," I hissed. "Now take your friend and get out of my house. If I see you again, I won't break bones. I will take heads." I stepped back, releasing him. He scrambled backward, grabbing his wheezing companion by the collar. They stumbled out the door, limping, broken, and terrified. They fell down the porch steps in their haste to escape the demon they had found in the hallway. I watched them run to their car and peel away tires screeching in the night. I closed the front door. I locked it. I engaged the deadbolt. I looked at my reflection in the hall mirror. My hair was gray, my face was lined, but the eyes were the same, cold, hard, alive. Hunter had sent wolves to kill a sheep. He did not know he was feeding them to a lion. I walked back to the living room. My knee throbbed a dull ache returning as the adrenaline faded, but it was a good pain. It was the pain of victory. I sat down and pulled out the burner phone. I dialed Silas. "It is done," I said. "Did they hurt you?" Silas asked. "They tried," I said. "They failed. They are running back to their handler now." "Good," Silas said. "I have the location of the Russian counting house. Do you want me to send the boys?" "No," I said. "I will handle the Russians. Hunter owes them $2 million. I am going to buy that paper. You are going to pay his debt." Silas asked, confused. "I am going to buy his leash," I corrected. "Once I own the debt, I own him, and when he realizes that his executioner is also his banker, he will wish he had died on that mountain. Prepare the funds, Silas. Tomorrow, we go shopping." I hung up the phone. I looked up the stairs toward the bedroom where Aaliyah was sleeping her drug-induced sleep. Hunter had promised to pay the Russians with her life. I was going to pay them with his nightmare. I turned off the lamp, plunging the room back into darkness. I sat there, cane across my lap, waiting for the dawn. Hunter would come back soon, expecting to find a corpse and a grieving daughter. Instead, he would find breakfast on the table and a father-in-law who just wouldn't die. The game was no longer about survival. It was about ownership. And I was about to foreclose on his soul. The sun rose over the Chicago suburbs, painting the sky in hues of violent orange and bruised purple. I stood in the kitchen of the mansion, grinding coffee beans with the slow, methodical rhythm of a man who had all the time in the world. The aroma of dark roast filled the air, masking the faint, lingering scent of bleach I had used to clean the blood from the foyer floor at 3 in the morning. I was dressed in my usual worn cardigan and gray slacks, looking every inch the harmless pensioner. My knee throbbed, a dull reminder of the previous night's violence, but my hands were steady. At 7:30, I heard movement upstairs. It was the heavy, frantic footsteps of a man who had not slept. Hunter came down the stairs. He looked like a ghost. His skin was pale and clammy, and his eyes were darting around the hallway, scanning the floorboards for signs of a struggle. He expected to find a body. He expected to find blood splattered on the walls, or perhaps my broken form at the bottom of the stairs, arranged to look like a tragic accident. Instead, he found a pristine hallway and the smell of fresh coffee. He stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, staring at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at the back door, which was locked and bolted. He looked at me pouring boiling water into the French press. The cognitive dissonance was almost visible on his face. He could not reconcile the reality before him with the plan he had set in motion. The wolves he had sent were gone, and the sheep was making breakfast. "Good morning, Hunter," I said, my voice raspy and pitching slightly higher to feign frailty. "You are up early. Did you sleep well?" Hunter blinked rapidly. He walked into the kitchen, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He pulled his phone from his pocket and checked the screen. I knew what he was looking for. He was looking for a text message from the thugs, a confirmation of the job done. But there was nothing. No confirmation. No answer. Just a terrifying silence. "Where were you last night?" Hunter asked, his voice tight. I looked up at him with innocent confusion. "I was in my room, Hunter. I took that sleeping pill you gave me a few weeks ago. I slept like a log." "Why? Did something happen?" Hunter ran a hand through his messy hair. He walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. There were no tire marks, no signs of the violence that had erupted just hours before. I had raked the gravel myself before the sun came up. "Nothing happened," he muttered. "I just thought I heard something. A noise. Probably just the wind," I said, pouring the coffee into 2 mugs. "Old houses make strange noises, Hunter. Sometimes it sounds like bones breaking, but it is just the house settling." He whipped his head around to look at me, searching my face for any sign that I knew, but I gave him nothing. I was just a senile old man pouring coffee. He took the mug I offered him, his hand shaking so hard the dark liquid rippled. He drank it in one large gulp, burning his throat, but he did not seem to notice. He was terrified. The Russians were expecting a call. They were expecting a payout. And instead, his hitman had vanished and his victim was standing there offering him caffeine. He needed a new plan. I could see the gears turning in his desperate mind. He could not wait for another night. He could not hire more muscle. He was out of time and out of options. He had to do it himself. "I am going to make lunch today," Bishop Hunter announced, suddenly his voice taking on a manic, forced cheerfulness. It was 11 o'clock. Hunter had never cooked a meal in his life. He considered domestic labor beneath him. But desperate men do desperate things. "You sit down," he said, pushing me gently toward the breakfast nook. "You look tired. Let me take care of you for once. I am going to make us some soup. Aaliyah loves my tomato soup. I will make enough for everyone." I sat down, obeying him. I watched him move around the kitchen. He was clumsy, pulling pots and pans from the cabinets with too much force. He opened a can of expensive organic tomato bisque. He put it on the stove. Then he stood there with his back to me, shielding the pot with his body. I saw his hand go into his pocket. I saw the quick, furtive movement of his arm. He wasn't using a shaker or a spice jar. He was dropping something directly into the bubbling liquid. It was likely the rest of the arsenic he had planned to use on Aaliyah, or perhaps something faster acting he had sourced from Dr. Kane. He stirred the soup vigorously, the metal spoon clanging against the side of the pot. He was sweating. A line of perspiration ran down the back of his neck, staining his collar. He was not a killer by nature, he was a killer by circumstance, and he was cracking under the pressure. "Soup is ready," he announced, turning around with a wide plastic smile that looked more like a rictus of pain. He ladled the soup into 2 bowls. One blue, one white. I watched him closely. He put a second ladle full into the blue bowl. He stirred that one again. That was the one. The blue bowl was the coffin. He carried the bowls to the table. He placed the white bowl at his own seat. He placed the blue bowl in front of me. The steam rose, carrying the scent of basil and death. "Eat up, Bishop," he said, sitting down opposite me. "I know we have had our differences. I know I have been stressed lately. But I want to start over. We are family after all." He picked up his spoon, but he did not eat. He watched me. His eyes were fixed on my hand, waiting for me to lift the poison to my lips. He was holding his breath. I picked up my spoon. I lifted it halfway to my mouth. I saw the anticipation in his eyes, the hunger for my death. Then I let my hand spasm. It was a calculated twitch, a performance of the neurological decline he claimed I had. The spoon flew from my fingers. It hit the edge of the bowl with a loud clack and spun off the table, clattering onto the floor near his feet. "Oh dear," I stammered, my hand trembling visibly. "I am so clumsy." My fingers just gave out. "I am sorry, Hunter." Hunter let out a sigh of pure frustration. He slammed his fist onto the table. "For God's sake, Bishop, can you not do anything right?" He pushed his chair back and bent down to retrieve the spoon. He had to reach under the table, his head dipping below the level of the tabletop. This was the moment. I did not hesitate. I did not shake. My hand moved with the speed of a striking viper. I grabbed my blue bowl and his white bowl. In less than a second, I crossed my arms and switched them. I placed the white bowl in front of me and the blue poisoned bowl in front of his empty chair. I adjusted the spoons. I sat back. It took 1 second to change the trajectory of fate. Hunter resurfaced, red-faced and angry, holding the dirty spoon. He threw it into the sink and grabbed a clean one from the drawer. He sat back down, never looking at the bowls. He was too focused on his anger, too focused on the fact that I was ruining his perfect murder schedule. "Eat," he commanded, pointing at the bowl in front of me. "Before it gets cold." I nodded submissively. "Thank you, Hunter. You are a good boy." I took a spoonful of the soup from the white bowl. It was warm. It tasted of tomatoes and cream. I swallowed. Hunter watched me. He watched for the choking. He watched for the gasping. When nothing happened, he relaxed. He assumed the poison was slow acting, or perhaps he was just so arrogant he thought he had won the moment I swallowed. He picked up his spoon. He dipped it into the blue bowl, the bowl he had laced with enough toxin to kill a horse. "This is good," he said, shoveling the soup into his mouth. He ate quickly, driven by a nervous hunger. He finished half the bowl in silence. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, savoring the justice that was unfolding before my eyes. It started 10 minutes later. Hunter stopped eating. He dropped his spoon. It clattered into the half-empty bowl, splashing red soup onto the table. He put a hand to his forehead. He blinked hard as if trying to clear his vision. "Is it hot in here?" he mumbled. He loosened his tie. His face was flushing a deep, unhealthy crimson. "I do not think so, Hunter," I said calmly, buttering a piece of bread. "The temperature is perfectly regulated." He groaned. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. His breathing became shallow and rapid. Sweat was pouring off him now, dripping from his nose and chin. "I feel sick," he gasped. "My stomach. It feels like fire." "Maybe you ate too fast," I suggested, taking a sip of water. "Or maybe it is a guilty conscience. They say that can rot you from the inside out." He looked at me. His pupils were dilated, blown wide black holes swallowing the blue of his iris. The drugs were hitting his system fast. The scopolamine mixed with the arsenic was a chaotic, brutal cocktail. Who said that, he whispered, looking past me. He turned his head, staring at the empty corner of the kitchen. His eyes widened in horror. He scrambled backward in his chair, the legs screeching against the floor. "Get away!" he screamed, flailing his arms at the empty air. "Get away from me! What do you see, Hunter?" I asked, leaning forward. "Aaliyah," he shrieked. "But it is not Aaliyah. Her face is melting. Why is she melting? Stop looking at me!" He fell out of his chair, crashing to the floor. He began to crawl backward, crab walking away from the phantom he had created. He vomited violently, the red soup spewing across the pristine tiles he had forced me to clean just yesterday. He was hallucinating. The toxins were firing every synapse in his brain, creating a waking nightmare. He saw the woman he had tortured coming back for him. He saw his sins made flesh. I stood up. I walked over to him. I did not limp. I stood tall, looking down at the man writhing in his own filth. "Help me," he gurgled, clutching at my pant leg. "Bishop, help me. There are snakes. There are snakes in my belly." I looked down at him with zero pity. I felt nothing but a cold, hard satisfaction. "It is not snakes, Hunter," I said, my voice dropping. The old man acted completely. "It is the soup you made for me." He looked up at me. Through the haze of pain and drugs, a spark of recognition flashed in his eyes. He realized then that the bowls had been switched. He realized that the prey had bitten back. "You," he wheezed, "you did this." I nudged his hand away with the toe of my boot. "I did not do anything, Hunter," I said. "I just let you eat your own cooking." "Bon appetit," he screamed again, curled into a fetal position, clutching his stomach as the cramps seized him. He was not going to die. Not yet. I knew the dosage. It would hurt. It would terrify him. It would make him wish he was dead. But it would not kill him. I needed him alive. I needed him to suffer, and I needed him to sign the rest of the papers. The front door chimed. It was the lawyer Hunter had summoned to witness the transfer of guardianship. He was early. Perfect timing, I said to the retching man on the floor. Your witness is here. Try to look presentable, Hunter. We have guests. I walked to the door, leaving him in his self-made hell. The janitor was gone, the bishop was running the house now, and the first order of business was to show the world exactly what kind of monster had been living in their midst. The screaming started before the lawyer even reached the door. Aaliyah had come down the stairs, drawn by the noise of her husband retching his soul onto the kitchen tiles. She stood in the doorway, clutching the railing with white knuckles, her face a mask of drug-induced confusion that swiftly morphed into sheer terror. She did not see the man who had protected her from the monsters under her bed for 30 years. She did not see the father who had washed blood off his hands to braid her hair. She only saw a senile old man standing over her fallen prince. Hunter let out a strangled sob when he saw her. He reached out a trembling hand, his fingers slick with sweat and tomato soup. "Aaliyah, help me," he croaked. "He tried to kill me. He is crazy." Aaliyah rushed to him, falling to her knees in the mess, heedless of her silk robe ruining in the filth. She cradled his head in her lap, wiping the vomit from his chin with her bare hands. Her eyes, when she looked up at me, were not the eyes of my daughter. They were the eyes of a stranger filled with a hatred so pure it stopped my breath in my throat. "What did you do?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "What did you give him?" "I did nothing, Aaliyah," I said softly, my heart breaking a little more with every second. "He tried to poison me." "I just switched the bowls." "Liar," she spat. "You are a liar and a violent old man. Look at him. He is suffering. He is the only one who takes care of us. He is the only one who loves us. Why do you hate him so much? Is it because he is successful? Is it because he is everything you never were?" Her words were daggers honed by years of Hunter's manipulation. He had spent every day of their marriage rewriting history, painting himself as the savior and me as the burden. He had isolated her, drugged her, and gaslit her until up was down and poison was medicine. "He does not love you, baby girl," I said, taking a step forward. "He is killing you. Look at your arms. Look at your stomach, the needles, the pills. It is not medicine. It is slow murder." "Don't you come near us," she shrieked, shielding Hunter with her body. "You are the sick one," Hunter told me. "He told me you would get violent. He told me the dementia would make you paranoid. He was right. You are a monster." Hunter groaned in her arms, playing his part to perfection even through the agony of the toxin. "Save me, Aaliyah," he whispered. "Get him away." I stood there, leaning on my cane, watching the tableau. It was the greatest tragedy of my life. I had built an empire to keep her safe, but I had failed to protect her from the one danger I could not shoot or bribe. I had failed to protect her from her own heart. She was suffering from a sickness worse than arsenic. She was in love with her executioner. I knew then that words would not work. Logic would not penetrate the fog of scopolamine and emotional abuse. I needed something harder, something brutal. I needed to break her heart to save her life. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the smartphone. It was sleek and modern, a stark contrast to the jitterbug phone I pretended to use. I tapped the screen, bringing up the video file Silas had sent me an hour ago. It was surveillance footage taken from inside Hunter's car 3 days prior. "Look at this, Aaliyah," I commanded, my voice hardening. "Do not look away." I shoved the screen in front of her face. She tried to turn away, but the sound coming from the speaker froze her. It was Hunter's voice, clear and arrogant, laughing. She stopped moving. She looked at the screen. The video showed Hunter in the driver's seat of his Porsche. Next to him was a woman I recognized. She was a receptionist at his firm, a young blonde with ambitious eyes. Hunter's hand was on her thigh. They were kissing. But it wasn't the infidelity that was the weapon. It was the conversation that followed. "When are you going to leave her?" the woman asked, pouting. "You said it would be over by Christmas." "It will be over sooner than that, babe," Hunter replied, grinning at the camera. "The bitch is fading fast." Dr. Kane upped the dosage. "Her liver is already shutting down. Another week, maybe 2, and her heart will just stop." The woman laughed. "And the money? $5 million in the trust plus the house," Hunter said. "We will be rich. And the best part is, her old man is too stupid to notice. I will put him in a state home the day after the funeral. Then it is just you, me, and the money in Mexico." The video ended. The silence in the kitchen was heavier than the grave. Aaliyah stared at the black screen. Her mouth was open slightly. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. I waited for the realization. I waited for the anger. I waited for her to push him away to see the viper she was holding. Instead, she closed her eyes. She shook her head slowly at first, then violently. "No," she whispered. "It is real, Aaliyah," I said. "He wants you dead. He wants the money." "No," she screamed, opening her eyes. They were wild, manic. "This is fake. Hunter told me about this. He told me you might try something like this." "What are you talking about?" I asked, stunned. "Deepfakes," she yelled, pointing a shaking finger at the phone. "AI. Hunter said you were spending all your time on the computer in the basement. He said you were obsessed with conspiracy theories. He said you might try to make fake videos to frame him because you are jealous of our love." I stared at her. The brilliance of Hunter's evil was almost admirable. He had inoculated her against the truth. He had planted the seed of doubt weeks ago, knowing that if I ever found proof, she would reject it as a fabrication of my diseased mind. He had turned my own evidence into a symptom of my madness. "It is not AI, Aaliyah," I pleaded. "It is him. Look at his face. Listen to his voice." "Get out!" she screamed. She stood up, swaying on her feet, fueled by a hysterical strength. She pointed to the door. "Get out of my house. I never want to see you again. You are not my father. My father would never try to destroy my marriage. My father would never hurt an innocent man. Get out before I call the police." Hunter, who was still on the floor, let out a low laugh. It was partially a groan of pain, but mostly it was a sound of pure triumph. He looked up at me through hooded eyes. His face was pale and sweaty, but his mouth curled into a smirk. He had won. He had turned my own daughter into his shield. "Go, Bishop," he rasped. "Listen to the lady of the house." I looked at Aaliyah. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face, but her jaw was set. She believed him. She chose him. If I stayed, I would have to hurt her to get to him. I would have to physically fight my own daughter to save her, and that was a line I could not cross. Not like this. "Fine," I said, my voice cold and hollow. "I will go." I turned my back on them. I walked to the kitchen door, my cane clicking on the tiles. I did not look back. I could hear Aaliyah sobbing, comforting the man who was planning to bury her. "Oh, baby, I am so sorry," she cried. "I will get you help. I will fix this." I walked through the mudroom and opened the back door. The storm had returned. The rain was coming down in sheets, a cold, relentless deluge that turned the world gray. I stepped out into it. I had no coat. I had no umbrella. I carried only a small duffel bag with a change of clothes and the burner phone. The water soaked me instantly, chilling me to the bone. But I welcomed it. It felt like a baptism. It washed away the smell of the house, the smell of sickness and lies. It washed away the last remnants of the janitor. I walked down the long driveway. The wind whipped my thinning hair and stung my eyes. I reached the iron gates at the end of the property. I stopped and looked back at the mansion. It loomed on the hill, a dark fortress of secrets. I saw a light go on in the master bedroom. Aaliyah was taking him upstairs. She was going to nurse him back to health. She was going to save her killer. I turned away. I walked onto the dark road. I was homeless. I was disowned. I was a 68-year-old man walking in the rain with nothing but the clothes on his back. To anyone driving by, I looked pathetic. A tragedy. But they couldn't see my eyes. They couldn't see the fire that had replaced the heartbreak. I wasn't walking away. I was regrouping. Hunter thought he had exiled me. He thought he had cast me out into the cold to die. He did not understand that the cold was my element. He did not understand that he had just set me free. A pair of headlights cut through the rain in the distance. The car moved slowly, prowling the wet asphalt like a shark in dark water. It was a massive vehicle, sleek and black, drinking the light. A Rolls-Royce Phantom. It pulled up beside me and stopped. The rear window rolled down with a silent hum. "Get in, Bishop," a voice said from the darkness of the back seat. I opened the door and slid into the warmth of the leather interior. Silas sat there dressed in an impeccable gray suit, holding a glass of amber liquid. He looked at me soaking wet and shivering. "Rough night?" he asked. I took the glass from his hand and drained it in one swallow. The whiskey burned a good, clean fire. "The sheep has chosen the wolf," I said, wiping the rain from my face. Silas nodded slowly. "Then we have to kill the wolf." I leaned back, closing my eyes. "No, Silas. Death is too easy. I want to take his world. I want to strip him of everything he thinks he owns. I want to buy his debt, his fear, and his future. And when he is naked and screaming in the gutter, only then will I let him die." Silas smiled, a thin, cruel curving of his lips. "Welcome back, boss." "Drive," I said to the chauffeur. The car pulled away, gliding silently into the night, leaving the suburbs behind. The Black Bishop had returned, and hell was coming with him. The heavy iron gates of the estate clicked shut behind me with a finality that echoed in the wet night air. I stood on the pavement, the rain soaking through my thin cardigan, plastering my gray hair to my skull. To any passing car, I was just a homeless old man cast out into the storm, a pathetic figure to be pitied or ignored. But as I stared down the long, empty road, I felt the weight of the last 20 years sliding off my shoulders along with the rainwater. The limp I had faked for so long vanished. My spine straightened. The trembling in my hands, a performance I had perfected to appear harmless, ceased entirely. I was no longer Bishop the janitor. I was no longer the frail father-in-law. I was the man who had once made the devil check under his bed before going to sleep. A pair of xenon headlights cut through the darkness, blindingly bright against the wet asphalt. The vehicle approached silently, a massive black shape that seemed to drink the light around it. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, long and sleek, a predator on wheels. It slowed to a stop inches from where I stood. The rear door opened and an umbrella bloomed into existence, held by a hand steady as a rock. Silas stepped out. He was older now, his face a map of scars and hard years, but he wore his suit with the same lethal elegance he always had. He held the umbrella over my head, shielding me from the downpour. He did not say a word. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes said everything. It was a look of loyalty, of readiness, of a soldier welcoming his general back from exile. I slid into the back seat. The interior smelled of rich leather and aged scotch. On the seat beside me lay a garment bag and a silver case. I stripped off the wet, cheap clothes I had worn to play the part of the victim. I threw the cardigan onto the floor mat. I peeled off the flannel shirt that smelled of the soup Hunter had tried to kill me with. I opened the garment bag. Inside was a suit cut from Italian wool, black as a moonless night, tailored to fit me not as I was, but as I am. I put on the crisp white shirt, the silk tie, the vest. I slipped my arms into the jacket. It fit like a second skin, restricting nothing, allowing for full range of motion. I opened the silver case. Inside, resting on velvet, was my old signet ring. It was heavy gold, set with a piece of black onyx carved into the shape of a bishop chess piece. I slid it onto my finger. It felt cold, heavy, and right. Silas got into the driver's seat and looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Where to, Bishop?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "The Red Room," I replied. "We have a debt to settle." The car glided forward, the engine a whisper of power. We drove toward the city, leaving the quiet lies of the suburbs behind. We were heading into the throat of the beast, to a club in the warehouse district that served as the front for the new Russian syndicate. These were the men Hunter owed. These were the men who were going to kill my daughter if they didn't get their money. They were violent, reckless, and hungry, but they were about to learn that there is always a bigger fish. We arrived at the club just after midnight. The bass from the music inside vibrated the pavement. Two bouncers the size of refrigerators stood at the door, arms crossed, sneers plastered on their faces. They saw an old man in a suit getting out of a fancy car and assumed I was a lost tourist or a confused grandfather. "We are closed, Grandpa," one of them grunted, stepping into my path. "Private party. Go home before you get hurt." I did not stop walking. I did not look up at him. I simply kept moving my cane, tapping a steady rhythm on the concrete. Silas was 2 steps behind me, a shadow with a gun. I said, "Get lost!" The bouncer growled, reaching out to grab my shoulder. I didn't break stride. I brought the head of my cane up in a short, sharp arc. It connected with the nerve cluster on the inside of his elbow. His arm went dead instantly. Before he could scream, I drove the brass tip of the cane into the top of his foot, crushing the small bones. He dropped to one knee, gasping. The second bouncer reached for his weapon, but Silas was already there, the barrel of a silenced pistol pressed against the man's kidney. "Open the door," Silas whispered. The bouncer, pale and sweating, pushed the heavy steel door open. We stepped inside. The club was dark, lit only by pulsing red strobes. The air smelled of sweat, cheap vodka, and ozone. We walked past the dance floor, ignoring the writhing bodies, and headed straight for the VIP section in the back. A heavy velvet rope blocked the way, guarded by 3 men in leather jackets. They saw us coming. They saw the way we moved. They reached into their jackets. I stopped 10 feet from them. "Tell Vladimir that the bishop is here to play," I said, my voice cutting through the thumping music. One of the men laughed. "Who?" he asked. Just tell him I said. The man spoke into his earpiece. His eyes widened. He looked at me again, searching my face. He nodded slowly and unhooked the rope. He is expecting you, the guard said, fear creeping into his tone. We walked down a long hallway lined with mirrors. At the end was a heavy oak door. I pushed it open. The office was soundproofed, the silence sudden and jarring after the noise of the club. Sitting behind a massive glass desk was Vladimir, the head of the Russian cell in Chicago. He was young, barely 40, with tattoos creeping up his neck and an arrogance that came from never having lost a war. He was counting stacks of money. 4 armed guards stood around the room, their weapons drawn, and pointed at my chest. Vladimir looked up. He smiled, showing gold-capped teeth. So he said, his accent thick, "This is the ghost I have heard whispers about. The Black Bishop. You look like a corpse who forgot to lie down." I walked to the center of the room. I did not look at the guns pointed at me. I looked only at him. "You hold a note," I said. "A debt. $2 million. The debtor is named Hunter." Vladimir laughed. "Ah, the son-in-law. The gambler. Yes, he owes me. And he is late. I was about to send my boys to collect his wife as collateral. That is why I am here," I said. Vladimir leaned back, putting his feet on the desk. "You are here to beg, old man. You are here to ask for more time. But I do not give time. I take fingers." I reached into my jacket pocket, the guard's tensed fingers tightening on triggers. I pulled out a checkbook. I placed it on the desk. "I am not here to beg," I said calmly. "I am here to buy." Vladimir looked at the checkbook, then back at me. He scoffed. "A check. You think I take checks from pensioners?" I picked up the gold pen from his desk. I wrote a check for $2 million. Then I wrote another one for $500,000. I ripped them out and slid them across the glass. $2 million for the principal," I said. $500,000 for the interest and the inconvenience. Vladimir picked up the checks. He looked at the numbers. He looked at the bank name. It was a Cayman Islands account, one that signaled deep, untouchable wealth. His expression changed. The arrogance wavered. "This is real?" he asked. "Call the number on the back," I said. "My banker is awake." Vladimir snapped his fingers. One of his men handed him a phone. He dialed, verified the funds, and hung up. He looked at me with new eyes. The predator had recognized a larger predator. But then greed flickered in his eyes. He looked at his 4 guards. He looked at the old man and his 1 bodyguard. "You have this kind of money," Vladimir said softly. "Maybe you have more. Maybe I keep the money and I keep you until you empty the account." It was the mistake I expected him to make. He was young, he didn't know the history. I raised my left hand. I caught the light with the onyx ring. "Do you know what this is?" I asked. Vladimir squinted. He leaned forward. Then he saw it. The bishop. The symbol of the man who had brokered the peace between the Italians and the cartels in the 90s. The man who had once saved Vladimir's own father from a federal indictment by making a judge disappear. His face drained of color. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over. "Papa told me stories," he whispered. "He said you were a myth." "I am very real," I said, "and I am very impatient." Vladimir looked at his guards. "Put them down," he screamed. "Put the guns down. You idiots, do you want us all to die?" The guards lowered their weapons, confused. Vladimir walked around the desk. He didn't attack. He bowed his head. He took my hand and kissed the ring. It was a gesture of submission, a recognition of the old laws. "Forgive me," Bishop Vladimir said, sweating. "I did not know he was your family. If I knew, I would never have touched him." "He is not my family," I said, pulling my hand away. "He is my prey." I pointed to the ledger on his desk. "Transfer the debt to me," I ordered. "Officially. I want the paper. I want the recording of his voice promising to pay. I want everything." Vladimir scrambled to obey. He opened a safe and pulled out a file. He handed it to me with trembling hands. "It is yours," he said. "We never saw him. We never touched him. We are out." I took the file. I checked the contents. It was all there. Hunter's signature, his desperate pleas recorded on digital drives, the leverage. "Pleasure doing business," I said. I turned to leave. At the door, I paused. "One more thing, Vladimir." "Yes, Bishop. If anyone else comes looking for him, if anyone else tries to touch my daughter, I will burn this building down with you inside it. Do we understand each other?" Vladimir nodded vigorously. "Crystal clear." We walked out of the club. The music was still thumping, but the air felt different. I walked back to the Rolls-Royce. I sat in the back seat and opened the file. I looked at Hunter's signature on the promissory note. He had signed his life away for a chance at a jackpot he would never hit. Silas started the car. "Now what?" Silas asked. "Now we tighten the noose," I said. I pulled out the burner phone. I found Hunter's number. I typed a message. I didn't want to sound like a father-in-law. I needed to sound like a monster. I needed to sound like the thing he feared most in the world. I typed, "The debt has been sold. The new management is not as patient as the Russians. Interest has doubled. You have 24 hours. I want the money or I want pieces of you. Start with the fingernails." I hit send. I watched the message status change to delivered. Miles away in the master bedroom of my house, I knew Hunter was looking at his phone. I knew the blood was draining from his face. I knew the terror was setting in. He thought he had bought himself time by poisoning my daughter. Instead, he had just started the clock on his own destruction. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. The Black Bishop was awake, and the game had just begun. I sat in the back of the Rolls-Royce watching the live feed from the hidden cameras inside the mansion on a tablet screen. The image was grainy in the low light, but the terror on Hunter's face was crystal clear. He had just received my text message. The threat of physical torture from a faceless creditor had shattered whatever composure he had left. He was pacing the study like a trapped animal, his hands pulling at his hair, his breathing coming in short, hyperventilating gasps. He knew the clock was ticking. 24 hours was not enough time to liquidate assets legally. He needed a miracle, or he needed to run. He rushed to the desk and clawed open his briefcase. He pulled out the manila folder, the one I had swapped in the dark. He needed to verify that he owned the house. He needed to reassure himself that he had the golden ticket that would save his life. He flipped the folder open. He scanned the first page. I watched his face freeze. The blood drained from his skin, leaving him gray and waxen. He blinked, rubbing his eyes as if he could not believe what he was seeing. He flipped to the next page and the next. His hands began to shake violently. These were not the deed transfers he had prepared. These were divorce papers. These were restraining orders. These were documents outlining his infidelity, his debts, and his abuse, stripping him of every cent he thought he controlled. "No," Hunter screamed. The sound tore through the speakers of the tablet. "No, this is impossible." She signed it. I saw her sign it. He threw the papers across the room. They fluttered down like dead leaves. He realized in that moment that he had been played, but he did not know by whom. He thought Aaliyah had tricked him. He thought his drugged, battered wife had somehow outsmarted him in the dark. He stormed out of the study and thundered up the stairs. I watched him kick open the bedroom door. Aaliyah was lying on the bed, weak and pale, her body fighting the toxins he had fed her. She flinched when he entered, trying to curl into a ball. "You did this!" Hunter roared, grabbing her by her hair and dragging her off the bed. "You switched the papers. You think you are smart. You think you can leave me." He threw her against the wall. Aaliyah cried out a sound of pure confusion and pain. She did not know what he was talking about. She had signed what he told her to sign. She was innocent, and that made his violence even more heinous. "Where are the real papers?" Hunter screamed, striking her across the face. "Where did you hide them? Tell me or I will kill you right now." I gripped the tablet so hard the screen almost cracked. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to tell Silas to turn the car around, to drive through the front door and tear Hunter apart with my bare hands. Watching my daughter suffer was a torture worse than any I had ever inflicted on my enemies. But I had to wait. If I went in now, I would save her body, but I would lose the war. I needed him to take the final step. I needed him to walk willingly into the trap where there were no witnesses and no escape. "I do not know what you mean," Aaliyah sobbed, shielding her face. "I signed what you gave me. Please, Hunter, stop." He hit her again. It was a brutal, desperate blow. He was not hitting her out of anger anymore. He was hitting her out of fear. He was a drowning man trying to climb on top of the only thing that could keep him afloat. "You are going to sign new ones," he hissed, leaning over her. "And then I am going to sell this house tonight. And if you try to trick me again, I will cut your throat." He turned away from her, ransacking the room, looking for anything he could sell. Watches, jewelry, cash. He was unraveling completely. "Now," I said to Silas, "make the call." Silas nodded. He picked up a disposable phone and dialed Hunter's number. I watched on the screen as Hunter froze. His phone was ringing. He looked at it with terror, thinking it was the Russians coming to collect early. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the device. Then he answered. "Who is this?" He barked, his voice trembling. Silas spoke. His voice was smooth, cultured, and dripping with the kind of money that buys islands. He sounded like every hedge fund manager Hunter aspired to be. Mr. Bishop Silas said, using Hunter's married name. My name is Mr. Sterling. I represent a private equity firm based in Zurich. We have been monitoring the real estate market in your area, and we have a very specific interest in your property. Hunter blinked, confused. My property. It is not for sale. Everything is for sale, mister. Or Bishop Silas purred, especially when the owner is in distress. We know about your liquidity issues. We know about your crypto losses. We know you need cash and you need it fast. Hunter went silent. The mention of his secret losses stunned him. Who are you? He whispered. We are the solution, Silas said. My client wants your land. He wants the house, the grounds, everything. And he is willing to pay a premium for a quick, quiet transaction. How much? Hunter asked, greed flickering in his eyes, replacing the fear for a fleeting second. $5 million, Silas said. Cash. Tonight. No banks. No waiting periods. No taxes. Just a clean exchange of ownership. $5 million. Hunter gasped. That was double the market value. It was enough to pay the Russians and still have enough to disappear to a tropical paradise. It was his salvation. There is a condition, Silas added. The deal must be done tonight. My client flies out to Tokyo in the morning. And since the deed is in your wife's name, she must be present to sign. Both of you. Hunter looked at Aaliyah, who was weeping on the floor. He looked at the phone. He ran the numbers in his head. He saw a way out. He saw a way to win. Where? Hunter asked. Warehouse 4 at the old shipyard, Silas said. Come alone. Bring the deed. Bring your wife. And Mr. Bishop, if you are late, the deal is off. Silas hung up. I watched Hunter on the screen. The transformation was immediate. The panic was still there, but now it was fueled by a manic hope. He believed it. He wanted to believe it so badly that he ignored all the red flags. He ignored the late hour. He ignored the strange location. He only heard $5 million. Get up! He kicked Aaliyah gently, not wanting to damage the merchandise now that she was worth $5 million. Get up, Aaliyah. We are going for a ride. Aaliyah tried to stand, but her legs gave out. I cannot, she whispered. I am sick. You are going to be fine, Hunter said, hauling her to her feet. He dragged her into the bathroom. He wet a washcloth and wiped the blood from her lip. He tried to fix her hair. He was like a child trying to fix a broken toy before his parents saw it. We are going to be rich, baby, he muttered, his eyes wide and unblinking. I fixed it. I fixed everything. We just have to go sign some papers and then we can go on a long vacation. Just you and me. He forced her into a coat covering her bruises. He practically carried her down the stairs. He did not look for me. He had forgotten I existed. In his mind, I was just a senile old man sleeping in the basement, irrelevant to his glorious future. He dragged her out the front door and shoved her into the passenger seat of his car. He ran to the driver's side, fumbling with his keys, dropping them twice before he managed to unlock the door. He was vibrating with a toxic mix of greed and adrenaline. I watched the car peel out of the driveway, tires screeching on the wet pavement. He was driving fast, driving reckless. He was driving straight into the jaws of the beast. Let's go, I said to Silas. Silas put the car in gear. The Phantom pulled away, following at a discreet distance. Hunter thought he was racing toward a pile of cash. He thought he was the smartest man in the room, the one who could cheat death and debt with one signature. He did not know that the warehouse was not filled with investors. He did not know that there was no money. He was bringing my daughter to me. He was delivering himself to judgment. I checked the load in my pistol. It was a heavy weight in my hand, a cold comfort. I had not fired a gun in anger in 20 years, but the weight felt familiar. It felt necessary. He hurt her, Silas, I said quietly, staring out at the rain-streaked city lights. He put his hands on her. He is a dead man walking, Bishop Silas replied. He just doesn't know it yet. We drove in silence, the city giving way to the industrial decay of the shipyards. The skeletal cranes loomed against the night sky like iron giants. This was my territory once. This was where I had made my name, and this was where Hunter's name would be erased. The warehouse was ahead, a dark monolith of corrugated steel and shadow. I saw Hunter's car skid to a halt near the entrance. I saw him drag Aaliyah out into the night. Park around the back, I told Silas. I want to be sitting in the chair when he walks in. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to see the old man he had mocked, the janitor he had abused sitting on the throne. I wanted the last thing he understood in this life to be the magnitude of his mistake. Tonight, the debt would be paid in full. Not with money, but with fear, and pain, and justice. The warehouse smelled of rust and salt water, the ancient scent of the Chicago shipyards that had seeped into the corrugated steel walls over a century of industry and decay. Outside, the wind howled off the lake, rattling the loose metal sheets like the bones of a skeleton. But inside, the silence was absolute. I sat in a high-backed leather chair, my back to the entrance, facing a long wooden table that I had salvaged from a boardroom 20 years ago. A single industrial light bulb hung from the ceiling on a frayed wire, casting a cone of harsh yellow light onto the table surface, leaving the rest of the vast space in deep shadow. I heard the screech of tires on the gravel outside, followed by the slamming of car doors. Then came the sound I had been waiting for, the heavy metallic groan of the sliding bay door being forced open. Hunter stomped into the warehouse, dragging Aaliyah by the arm. She stumbled, her feet scraping against the concrete, her breathing ragged and shallow. She looked small in the cavernous space, a broken bird in the grip of a predator. Hunter stopped just inside the circle of light, his eyes darting around the empty room. He was sweating despite the chill in the air. His suit disheveled, his tie loosened. He held a briefcase in one hand and my daughter in the other. He expected a team of lawyers. He expected suits and laptops and wire transfers. Instead, he found emptiness and a lone figure sitting in the dark. "Where is everyone?" Hunter shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. "Mr. Sterling, we are here. We have the papers." He pulled Aaliyah forward roughly. She let out a low moan of pain that made my hand tighten on the head of my cane. It was not the cheap aluminum cane I used to play the part of the cripple. It was my old cane, made of polished ebony, topped with a heavy gold handle carved in the shape of a dragon. It was a weapon and a symbol, and tonight it was a gavel. Hunter scanned the room, panic beginning to edge out his greed. "This does not look like an office. Where is the money? We do not have time for games. My wife is sick. We need to sign and leave." He pushed Aaliyah toward the table. She collapsed into a chair, her head falling forward onto her chest. She was barely conscious, fighting the poison he had fed her. Hunter slammed his briefcase onto the table. "Hey, you!" he yelled at my back. "Are you the assistant? Where is Sterling? Tell him I want the $5 million now. Cash or wire, I do not care, just get it done." I did not move. I sat perfectly still, a statue in the gloom. I wanted him to feel the wrongness of the situation. I wanted his instincts to scream at him that he had walked into a grave. Hunter pulled a gun from his waistband. It was a small chrome pistol, the kind a coward buys to feel powerful. He waved it at my back. "Turn around," he screamed. "Look at me when I am talking to you." I said, "Where is the money?" I reached out and placed my hand on the table. The light caught the gold dragon on my cane and the heavy onyx ring on my finger. Hunter froze. He recognized the ring. He had seen it on the hand of the old man he bullied in the kitchen. He had seen it on the hand of the janitor he treated like a dog. I slowly spun the chair around. The leather creaked. I faced him. I was not hunched over. I was not squinting. I sat with my legs crossed, my back straight, my face a mask of cold judgment. I looked him in the eye, and for the first time in 5 years, I let him see the man I really was. Hunter's mouth fell open. The gun wavered in his hand. He blinked, trying to process the image. He saw the expensive suit. He saw the silk tie. He saw the eyes of a killer staring out from the face of his father-in-law. "Bishop," he whispered, the name falling from his lips like a curse. "What are you doing here? Where is the buyer? I am the buyer." "Hunter," I said, my voice deep and resonant, filling the space without effort. "I am the seller, and I am the judge." Hunter shook his head violently, stepping back. "No, you are senile. You are crazy. You are supposed to be in the basement. This is a trick. Who put you up to this? Is it Aaliyah?" He looked at Aaliyah, but she was slumped on the table, oblivious to the confrontation. "No one put me up to this," I said, standing up. "I did not need the cane to rise. I moved with power. I bought your debt, Hunter. I own the paper you signed with the Russians, and now I am here to collect." Hunter looked at the briefcase on the table, then back at me. His mind was snapping. The reality he had constructed, where he was the genius and everyone else was a pawn, was shattering into a million pieces. "You," he stammered, "you are the Black Bishop." I tapped the dragon head of my cane on the concrete floor. The sound was sharp and final. I confirmed. And you have broken my only rule. You touched my family. Hunter stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. The man he had mocked, the man he had shoved, the man he had planned to bury in a state home was standing before him as a king of the underworld. The realization hit him like a physical blow, but then his survival instinct kicked in. It was a cornered rat's instinct, vicious and stupid. He raised the gun. He pointed it directly at my chest. His hand was shaking, but at this range he could not miss. "You think you can scare me, old man?" he screamed, spit flying from his lips. "I do not care who you were 40 years ago. Right now you are just a corpse in a suit." He cocked the hammer of the pistol. The click echoed in the silence. "I am leaving here with that money," he yelled. "And I am leaving with her. You are going to sign whatever I tell you to sign, or I will put a bullet in your heart." I did not flinch. I did not raise my hands. I simply reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. "Stop!" Hunter shrieked. "Don't move!" I pulled out a silver cigar case. I opened it and selected a thick Cuban cigar. I took my time. I clipped the end with a gold cutter. I placed it in my mouth. "Shoot me then, Hunter," I said around the cigar. "Pull the trigger. See what happens." Hunter's finger tightened on the trigger. He was going to do it. He was insane with fear and greed. "Goodbye, Bishop," he hissed. Suddenly the air in the warehouse changed. It wasn't a sound. It was light. Dozens of small red dots appeared on Hunter's body. They danced across his white shirt, settled on his chest, crawled up his neck, and fixed themselves on his forehead. There were at least 20 of them. Laser sights. Hunter froze. He looked down at his chest. He saw the red lights trembling on his skin. He looked up. From the darkness of the rafters, from the catwalks high above, from the shadows behind the crates, armed men materialized. They were not street thugs. They were professionals holding military-grade rifles with suppressors. They had been there the whole time, silent and invisible, waiting for my command. Hunter spun around looking for an escape, but there were more lasers behind him. He was painted with light. He was a Christmas tree of targets. "Drop it," I said. I produced a gold lighter. I flicked the wheel. The flame flared up, illuminating my face. I lit the cigar, taking a long, slow drag. I exhaled a cloud of blue smoke that drifted toward him. Hunter looked at me. He looked at the snipers. He looked at the gun in his hand, which suddenly felt very heavy and very useless. "If you pull that trigger," I said calmly, "my men will turn you into a red mist before your body hits the floor. You will be dead before you hear the sound of your own gun." Hunter began to whimper. It was a pathetic, high-pitched sound. The arrogance drained out of him, leaving only a terrified child. "Who are these people?" he cried. "They are my court," I said, "and court is in session." Hunter's knees gave way. He dropped the gun. It clattered to the floor, sliding away from him. He fell to his knees, raising his hands in surrender. "Please," he sobbed, "please don't kill me. I will do anything. I will sign anything. Just let me go." I walked around the table. The sound of my footsteps was the only thing in the room. I stopped in front of him. I looked down at the top of his head. I took another drag of the cigar and blew the smoke directly into his face. "Money is here, son-in-law," I said, pointing to a metal briefcase that Silas had placed in the shadows earlier. "It is right there. $5 million. Hunter looked at the case. Hope flared in his eyes, a desperate, irrational hope. "Take it," I said. "It is yours." He reached for it. He actually reached for it. "But you have to walk through me to get it," I added. I raised the cane. I wasn't going to shoot him. That was too quick. I was going to take him apart piece by piece. I was going to make him feel every ounce of pain he had inflicted on my daughter. "Get up, Hunter," I commanded. "Pick up your knife. Pick up your gun. Fight for your life. Because nobody walks out of my court without paying the toll." I signaled to the snipers. The red dots vanished. Hunter looked around confused. He thought he had a chance. He thought it was just him and an old man now. He scrambled for his gun, his fingers closing around the grip. He stood up, leveling the weapon at me again, his face twisting into a mask of hate. "You are a fool," he screamed. "You should have let them kill me." He pulled the trigger. Click. The gun was empty. I had removed the firing pin from his weapon days ago while he slept. I had known he would try to use it. I was always 3 moves ahead. Hunter stared at the gun in horror. He pulled the trigger again and again. Click, click, click. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of the wolf who has cornered the rabbit. My turn, I said. I swung the cane. The dragon head connected with his wrist, shattering the bone. Hunter screamed, dropping the useless gun. Now we dance, I whispered, stepping into his space. And you are going to let me lead. Hunter knelt on the cold concrete of the warehouse floor, clutching his shattered wrist against his chest. His face was a mask of agony and sweat, but his eyes still held a flicker of defiance, the desperate denial of a man who refused to believe his luck had finally run out. I stood over him, feeling the weight of the cane in my hand, but I did not strike him again. Physical pain was fleeting. I wanted to inflict a wound that would never heal. I wanted to strip him bare in front of the woman he had promised to love and cherish. Aaliyah sat at the table, her head resting on her arms. She was breathing heavily, the drugs still clouding her mind, but the violence of the last few minutes had pierced the fog. She was watching us. She was seeing her husband broken and weeping at the feet of the father she had banished. It was time to show her why. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. It was not the debt papers. It was something far more personal. I threw it at Hunter. The papers scattered across the floor in front of him, mixing with the dust and the grime. "Read it, Hunter," I commanded, my voice echoing in the vast space. "Read it to your wife." Hunter looked down at the papers. He recognized them immediately. They were copies of the toxicology reports from the blood samples I had taken from Aaliyah's hairbrush and toothbrush weeks ago. They were the lab results from the blue pills. They were the invoices from Dr. Kane for consultation fees that cost more than a luxury car. He stayed silent, his jaw working. "Read it!" I roared, slamming my cane onto the table. Hunter flinched. "Arsenic," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Mercury. Scopolamine." I looked at Aaliyah. She was lifting her head, her eyes finding mine. "Did you hear that, baby girl?" I asked softly. "Arsenic. That is why your stomach hurts. That is why your hair is thinning. Mercury. That is why your hands shake. Scopolamine. That is why you cannot remember days at a time. That is why you do whatever he tells you." Aaliyah looked at Hunter. "No," she breathed. "He gives me vitamins. He takes care of me." "He has been poisoning you for 2 years," I said, turning back to Hunter. "He did not just want you dead. He wanted you weak. He wanted you pliable. He wanted you to thank him while he poured the lethal dose down your throat." I kicked the papers toward him. "Tell her, Hunter. Tell her about the dosages. Tell her how you mixed it in her morning smoothies. Tell her how you laughed about it with Dr. Kane." Hunter looked up at me, his eyes filled with a venomous hate. "She was sick anyway," he spat. "She was always weak. I just sped up the inevitable." Aaliyah let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She tried to stand up, pushing herself away from the table, away from him. The realization was crashing down on her, a tidal wave of horror. The man who held her hair while she vomited was the one making her sick. The man who whispered comfort in her ear was the one causing her nightmares. "You tried to kill me," she whispered. "I did what I had to do," Hunter yelled, suddenly finding his voice. "I have debts, Aaliyah, real debts. I needed the money and you were just sitting on it. You were useless. You were just an anchor dragging me down." I stepped between them, cutting off his line of sight. I was not done. The poison was just the method. I needed to show her the motive in flesh and blood. I nodded to the shadows in the back of the warehouse. Silas stepped forward, dragging a woman with him. She was young, blonde, and dressed in a short skirt and heels that were not made for walking on concrete. She was crying, her makeup running down her face in black streaks. It was the receptionist, the woman from the video, the woman Hunter had promised a life in Mexico. Hunter's eyes went wide. "Jessica," he gasped. She looked at him, then she looked at me. She saw the snipers in the rafters. She saw the broken man on the floor. She saw the Black Bishop. Terror override her loyalty. She fell to her knees, her hands clasped in prayer. "Please," she begged, looking at me. "Please, Mr. Bishop, I did not do anything. He told me he was going to leave her. I did not know he was going to kill her." "Liar," I said calmly. I pulled out my phone and played a recording. It was a voicemail she had left for Hunter 2 days ago. "Hey baby, make sure you finish it tonight. I booked the flights to Tulum for tomorrow morning. I do not want to wait anymore. Just give her the big dose and let's go." The voice rang out in the silent warehouse, tinny and cruel. Jessica put her hands over her face, sobbing. "Tell her," I said to Jessica, pointing at Aaliyah. "Tell my daughter what the plan was for tonight." Jessica looked at Aaliyah. She could not meet her eyes. She looked at the floor. "He was going to get the money," she stammered. "He said he had a buyer for the house. 5 million cash. He was going to bring you here. He was going to make you sign the papers. And then—" She paused, choking on a sob. "And then," I prompted. "And then he was going to give you an overdose," she whispered. "He had a syringe in the car. He said it would look like a heart attack brought on by the stress of the sale. He said we would leave your body here, and by the time they found you, we would be in Mexico." Aaliyah stared at the woman. She stared at the mistress who had helped plan her execution. The last vestiges of the drug-induced fog evaporated, burned away by the heat of the truth. She looked at Hunter. She looked at the man she had defended against her own father, the man she had thrown me out of the house for. She saw him now. Not the charming husband, not the successful businessman. She saw the rat. She saw the coward who would kill his wife to pay a gambling debt. Hunter scrambled backward on his knees, trying to get away from Aaliyah's gaze. "She is lying," he screamed, pointing at Jessica with his good hand. "She is crazy. Bishop paid her to say that. It is a setup, Aaliyah. Can't you see? He is framing me." Aaliyah stood up. She swayed slightly, her legs still weak, but she did not fall. She walked around the table, moving slowly like a ghost. She stopped in front of Hunter. He looked up at her, hope flickering in his eyes. "Baby, listen to me," he pleaded. "We can fix this. Just tell your dad to let me go. We can go home. I will take care of you." Aaliyah looked down at him. Her face was stone. There were no tears. There was no anger. There was only a profound, chilling emptiness. "You killed our baby," she said, her voice flat. Hunter blinked, confused. "What baby?" "The one I lost last year," she said. "The miscarriage. I was sick then too. You were giving me the blue pills. You killed my child, Hunter." I felt a fresh wave of rage wash over me, but I held it back. This was her moment. Hunter stammered, his face turning the color of ash. "That was an accident. You were stressed." Aaliyah leaned down. She got close to his face. She looked deep into his eyes, searching for a shred of the man she thought she married. She found nothing. "You are not a man," she whispered. "You are a disease." She gathered the saliva in her mouth. It was a small act, a petty act, but it was the most violent thing she had ever done. She spat in his face. It hit him on the cheek, sliding down toward his chin. Hunter recoiled as if he had been shot. He wiped his face, his expression twisting from fear to pure, unadulterated rage. "You bitch!" he screamed, trying to lunge at her. "You ungrateful, useless bitch! I should have killed you months ago. You are nothing without me. You are just a sick, pathetic cow with a daddy complex." He tried to grab her leg, but I was there. I brought the cane down on his shoulder hard enough to bruise bone. He collapsed, howling in pain. "That is enough," I said. I looked at Aaliyah. She was standing tall, her chest heaving. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. She looked at me. Her eyes were clear. The spell was broken. The victim was gone. "I am sorry, Dad," she said, her voice breaking. I shook my head. "Do not apologize. Just watch," I signaled to Silas. "Take the girl outside," I said, pointing to Jessica. "Give her a bus ticket and a warning. If I ever see her in Chicago again, she goes in the river." Silas grabbed Jessica by the arm and dragged her out. She went willingly, grateful to be alive. Now it was just us, the father, the daughter, and the monster. I looked at Hunter writhing on the floor. He was broken. He was exposed. But he was still breathing, and that was a problem I intended to solve. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a knife. It was a switchblade, old and sharp. I flicked it open. The blade gleamed in the harsh light. I tossed it onto the floor in front of Hunter. It landed with a metallic clatter, sliding within reach of his good hand. He looked at the knife. He looked at me. "Pick it up," I said. Hunter looked confused, terrified. "What?" "Pick it up." I repeated, my voice dropping to a growl. "You want to kill us? You want to be a tough guy. Here is your chance." I took a step back, spreading my arms. I dropped my cane. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. I stood unarmed, an old man in a suit facing a desperate younger man with a knife. "Kill me, Hunter," I taunted him. "Kill me, and you walk out of here. Kill me, and you get the money. It is just you and me, no snipers, no guards, man to man." Hunter looked at the knife. His hand trembled. He looked at the exit. He looked at Aaliyah, watching him with cold eyes. He knew he had no choice. He knew this was the only way out. He grabbed the knife. He scrambled to his feet, holding his broken wrist against his chest, the blade extended in his shaking right hand. "You are crazy, old man," he hissed, spit flying from his lips. "You want to die. Fine. I will kill you, and then I will finish her." He lunged. It was a clumsy, desperate attack fueled by fear and hatred. He aimed for my stomach, wanting to gut me. I did not move until the blade was inches from my vest. I did not need to run. I did not need to hide. I had spent 40 years dancing with death. Hunter was just a clumsy amateur trying to cut in. I stepped to the side, a subtle shift of weight. His momentum carried him forward. I caught his wrist, the one holding the knife, with my left hand. I twisted it, forcing his arm up and out. At the same time, I drove my right palm into his elbow. There was a loud snap. Hunter screamed, dropping the knife. His arm hung uselessly at his side, broken at the joint. I swept his legs out from under him. He hit the concrete hard face first. I placed my boot on the back of his neck, pinning him to the floor. I leaned down close to his ear. That, I whispered, was for the baby. I pressed harder, cutting off his air. He clawed at the floor, his fingernails breaking on the stone. "And this," I said, grinding my heel, "is for my daughter." I lifted my foot and kicked him in the ribs. I heard the crack. I kicked him again and again. I did not stop until he stopped moving, until he was just a sobbing, broken heap on the floor. I stepped back, straightening my tie. I picked up my cane. I looked at Aaliyah. She was watching me. She was not afraid. She nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement of the justice that had been served. "It is over," I said. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Silas had made the call. The police were coming. But they were not coming for me. Hunter groaned, trying to lift his head. "You are going to jail," he wheezed, blood bubbling on his lips. "You assaulted me." I smiled. "No, Hunter. I defended my daughter from a man who had drugs, illegal weapons, and a confession from his mistress." I pointed to the corner of the room where a gym bag sat open, revealing bricks of white powder I had planted there an hour ago. And I said, pointing to the bag, "It looks like you were planning a major distribution deal to pay off your debts. Possession with intent to distribute, attempted murder, fraud." I leaned over him one last time. "You are not going to the hospital, son. You are going to prison. And in prison, you belong to me." The warehouse doors burst open. Blue lights flooded the room. Officers swarmed and guns drawn. I raised my hands calmly. Aaliyah stepped to my side, taking my arm. We stood together, united against the chaos. "Officer," I called out, my voice trembling with the perfect pitch of a traumatized old man. "Thank God you are here. He tried to kill us. He tried to kill us all." The warehouse fell into a heavy silence that smelled of rust and impending violence. I looked at the red laser dots dancing on Hunter's chest, and I felt a wave of disgust. It was too easy. Ending him like this with a bullet from the shadows would be efficient, but it would not be justice. It would be an execution, and while I have ordered many executions in my life, this situation demanded something more personal. Hunter had used his physical strength to intimidate my daughter for years. He had used his size to make her feel small. He had put his hands on her, thinking there were no consequences for bruising a woman. I needed to show him that there was always a bigger predator. I needed to break him not with a gun, but with the very hands he thought were too old to hold a cup of tea. I raised my hand and signaled to the rafters. "Stand down," I commanded, my voice echoing off the corrugated steel walls. The red dots vanished instantly. The snipers did not move, they did not make a sound, but the threat of immediate death was lifted. The atmosphere in the room shifted from a firing squad to a coliseum. Hunter looked around, blinking rapidly, his eyes darting from the dark corners of the ceiling to me. He was confused. He was trembling. He did not understand why I had called off the dogs. I reached into the pocket of my jacket. Hunter flinched, thinking I was reaching for a pistol, but I pulled out a knife. It was a simple blade, heavy and sharp, the kind of steel that holds an edge forever. I had carried it since 1985. It had saved my life more times than I could count. I flicked my wrist and tossed the knife onto the concrete floor. It skittered across the rough surface, the metal ringing out with a sharp, clear note before coming to a rest at Hunter's feet. "Pick it up," I said. Hunter stared at the blade, then looked up at me. His face was slick with sweat and snot, a portrait of a man whose soul had been eaten by fear. "What are you doing?" he rasped. "I am giving you a chance." "Hunter," I said, unbuttoning my suit jacket and tossing it onto the table next to my stunned daughter. "You think you are a tough guy. You think you are a man because you can beat a woman. Well, here is your opportunity." I stepped away from the table, moving into the open space in the center of the warehouse. I spread my arms wide, exposing my chest. I did not take a fighting stance. I stood relaxed, my weight evenly distributed, my eyes locked on his. "If you can stick that knife in me," I continued, my voice low and steady, "I will let you walk out that door. No snipers, no police, just you and the money." Hunter looked at the exit. The bay door was open just a crack, revealing the rainy night outside. Freedom was 50 feet away. The only thing standing in his way was a 68-year-old man with a bad knee. I saw the calculation in his eyes. I saw the moment his fear turned into a desperate, vicious resolve. He did not see the Black Bishop anymore. He saw a pensioner. He saw an old man who had spent the last 5 years shuffling around a kitchen. He thought he could win. He scrambled for the knife, his fingers closing around the handle. He stood up, his breathing ragged. He held the knife awkwardly, gripping it like a hammer. He was not a fighter. He was a bully, and bullies always make the same mistake. They commit too early. "Die, you old freak," he screamed. He charged. He came at me with everything he had, a wild telegraphed lunge aimed at my stomach. He wanted to gut me. He wanted to silence the only witness to his humiliation. I did not move until he was inside my guard. To an observer, it might have looked like I was frozen, but I was simply waiting for him to overextend. When the blade was inches from my vest, I pivoted. It was a small movement, a simple shift of my left foot, but it was enough. Hunter's momentum carried him past me. As he stumbled forward, I brought my right hand up, not in a fist, but in an open palm strike. I drove the heel of my hand into the side of his neck right below the ear. It was a precise blow designed to shock the vagus nerve. Hunter gagged, his legs turning to jelly. He crashed into a stack of pallets, but he did not drop the knife. He was fueled by a manic adrenaline that masked the pain. He scrambled up, turning to face me again. There was blood in his mouth. He slashed the air wildly, trying to keep me at bay. "Stay back!" he yelled. "I will kill you. I swear I will kill you." I walked toward him. I did not rush. I walked with the rhythmic inevitability of a ticking clock. "You are slow, Hunter," I said. "You are sloppy, and you are weak." He lunged again, this time aiming for my throat. I caught his wrist. My grip was iron. I felt the bones of his forearm shift under my fingers. He tried to pull away, but he was trapped. I looked into his eyes and I saw the realization dawn on him. He was not fighting an old man. He was fighting a lifetime of violence honed into a single point. I twisted his arm outward against the joint. There was a wet snap as the radius bone fractured. Hunter screamed a high-pitched wail that tore through the warehouse. The knife fell from his useless hand, clattering to the floor. I did not let go. I pulled him close, pulling him into my personal space. I swept my leg behind his, kicking out his knee with a force that shattered the patella. He collapsed backward, hitting the concrete with a thud that shook the floor. I stood over him. He was curled in a fetal position, clutching his broken arm and his ruined leg, sobbing like a child. I placed my boot on his chest, pinning him down. I leaned over him, my face inches from his. That I whispered was for Aaliyah. I could have ended it there. I could have crushed his windpipe. I could have picked up the knife and finished the job. The old bishop would have done it without blinking. But I was not just a gangster anymore. I was a father, and I needed my daughter to see that justice was not just about violence, it was about consequences. I stepped back, straightening my tie. I looked at Aaliyah. She was standing by the table, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. She had never seen this side of me. She had never seen the violence that lived in my blood. But she did not look away. She looked at Hunter writhing on the floor, and then she looked at me. And in her eyes I did not see fear. I saw understanding. She finally understood what it took to keep the wolves at bay. Sirens began to wail in the distance. They were faint at first, but growing louder with every second. Silas had timed it perfectly. The cavalry was coming not to save Hunter, but to bury him. I walked over to the corner of the warehouse where a black gym bag sat in the shadows. I picked it up and walked back to Hunter. I unzipped the bag and dumped the contents over his heaving chest. Several bricks of white powder wrapped in plastic fell onto him, followed by a handgun with the serial number filed off. Hunter coughed, spitting blood. "What is this?" he wheezed. "This is your insurance policy, Hunter," I said. "You wanted money so badly I figured you must have turned to drug trafficking to pay your debts. Possession with intent to distribute. Attempted murder. Fraud." I leaned over him one last time. "You are not going to the hospital, son. You are going to prison, and in prison, you belong to me." The warehouse doors burst open. Blue and red lights flooded the space, blinding and chaotic. Police officers in tactical gear swarmed in shouting commands. "Police, get down on the ground. Let me see your hands." I raised my hands slowly, turning to face them. My face transformed instantly. The hardness vanished, replaced by the terrified expression of a victim who had just survived a nightmare. "Officer, thank God you are here," I shouted, my voice trembling. "He has a gun. He has drugs. He tried to kill us." The officers rushed past me, tackling Hunter, who was still screaming about broken bones. They saw the drugs on his chest. They saw the knife on the floor. They saw a young woman bruised and battered and an old man shaking in a suit. The narrative was written for them in bold letters. They cuffed Hunter, dragging him up despite his screams of agony. "It is a setup," he yelled, spitting blood at the officers. "That old man is crazy. He is the Black Bishop. He broke my arm. Check his pockets." The sergeant in charge looked at me. He saw a gray-haired man leaning heavily against a table, looking like he was about to have a heart attack. Then he looked at Hunter, a young man ranting about mob bosses and conspiracies while covered in cocaine. "Save it for the judge, son," the sergeant said, pushing Hunter toward the door. "You have the right to remain silent, and I suggest you use it." I watched them drag him away. He looked back at me one last time. His eyes met mine, and in that moment he knew. He knew that the prison he was going to was not a sanctuary. He knew that my reach extended through the concrete walls. He knew that his hell was just beginning. Aaliyah walked over to me. She took my arm, steadying me, though I did not need it. "Is it over, Dad?" she asked, her voice quiet. I looked at the empty doorway where the flashing lights were fading into the night. "The war is over, baby girl," I said. "Now we just have to sweep up the glass." The flashing lights of the police cruisers painted the warehouse walls in a chaotic rhythm of blue and red. Hunter was on his knees. His expensive suit ruined his face, a mask of snot and blood. He was weeping openly now, a broken man who realized too late that he was never the player, only the pawn. The officers hauled him up, their grip unyielding. He did not look like a master manipulator anymore. He looked like a frightened child. "Bishop, please," he wailed, his voice cracking. "Do not let them take me. I will do anything. I will sign the divorce papers. I will disappear. Just help me." I stood there leaning on my cane, watching him with eyes as cold as the grave. I did not feel pity. I felt the grim satisfaction of a gardener pulling a weed by the root. "You had your chance, Hunter," I said. "I gave you a knife. I gave you a choice. You chose violence. Now you get justice." As the officers dragged him toward the exit, another car pulled up. It was a modest sedan, old and reliable. The doors opened, and an older couple stepped out, looking confused and terrified. It was Robert and Martha Hunter's parents. They were decent people in their own small way, but they had raised a monster, and they had looked down on me for years, treating me like the help whenever they visited. I had sent Silas to fetch them an hour ago, telling them their son was in trouble and needed them. I wanted witnesses. I wanted them to see the fruit of their labor. Hunter saw them. His face crumbled. "Mom, Dad," he sobbed, struggling against the handcuffs. "Help me. They are lying. It is a setup." Robert looked at his son, covered in blood and white powder. He looked at the police. He looked at the drugs on the table. He looked at Aaliyah, bruised and battered, sitting in the chair. "What did you do, son?" Martha whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "He tried to kill my daughter, Martha," I said, stepping forward. "He poisoned her for 2 years. He forged documents. He dealt drugs. And tonight he tried to murder us both for $5 million. Robert looked at me. He saw the suit. He saw the ring. He saw the way the police officers nodded at me with respect. He realized that the narrative he had believed about the poor janitor was a lie. "I am sorry, Robert," I said, "but your son is not coming home. Not for a very long time." Hunter screamed as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser. He banged his head against the window, shouting my name, shouting curses, shouting for his mother. Martha collapsed into Robert's arms, weeping. They watched the car drive away, taking their pride and joy to a cage. I turned away. My business with them was done. They would live with the shame. That was punishment enough. I walked back to Aaliyah. She was shivering, the shock setting in. "Come on, baby girl," I said, extending my hand. "Let us get you out of here." We left the warehouse, leaving the police to clean up the mess. Silas opened the door of the Phantom. I helped Aaliyah inside, wrapping her in a cashmere blanket. "To St. Jude's," I told Silas. "The private wing." The car glided through the night, smooth and silent. Aaliyah leaned her head on my shoulder. She smelled of the warehouse dust and fear, but underneath that she still smelled like my little girl. "I am so tired, Dad," she whispered. "Sleep," I said, stroking her hair. "I have you. Nothing can hurt you now." We arrived at the hospital. It was not the place where Dr. Kane practiced his butchery. This was a sanctuary of glass and steel where the best doctors in the world worked for people who could afford miracles. I had kept a retainer here for 20 years just in case. They were waiting for us. A team of specialists whisked Aaliyah away. I walked beside the gurney, holding her hand until they reached the double doors of the treatment unit. I sat in the waiting room. It was quiet. The only sound was the ticking of a clock and the hum of the ventilation. I felt the weight of the night settle on me. My knee throbbed. My knuckles were bruised. I felt every one of my 68 years. Hours passed. Dr. Evans, the chief of toxicity, came out. He looked tired, but he smiled. "She is going to be fine, Bishop," he said. We started chelation therapy to remove the heavy metals. The arsenic levels were high, but not critical. The scopolamine is already flushing out. She needs rest and time, but there is no permanent organ damage. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Thank you, doctor. Can I see her? She is sleeping, but yes, sit with her." I walked into the room. Aaliyah looked small in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors and IV lines. The machines beeped a steady, reassuring rhythm. Her face was clean, the bruises standing out starkly against her skin, but she looked peaceful. I pulled a chair up to the bedside. I sat down and took her hand. It felt frail in mine. I remembered holding this hand when it was tiny enough to wrap around my finger. I remembered promising her mother on her deathbed that I would keep our girl safe. I had failed. I had led a wolf into the sheepfold because I was too busy playing the sheep. I thought that by hiding my past, I was protecting her future. I thought that if I became harmless, the world would treat her gently. I was a fool. The world is not gentle. The world is hungry, and if you do not show your teeth, the world will eat you. I watched the sun come up through the window. The light touched her face. Her eyelids fluttered. She groaned low in her throat. "Aaliyah," I said softly, "I am here." She opened her eyes. They were foggy. At first, then they focused. She saw me. She saw the suit. She saw the ring. But she did not pull away. "Dad," she croaked. "Here, drink this." I held a cup of water with a straw to her lips. She drank greedily. "I am sorry," she said, tears welling up in her eyes and spilling over. "I am so sorry, Dad. I was so stupid. I let him hurt you. I let him hurt me. I chose him over you." "Hush," I said, wiping the tears from her cheeks with my thumb. "No," she insisted, trying to sit up. "You have to know. I did not know who he was. I thought he loved me. I thought I was protecting our family. But I was protecting a monster. I was so blind." "You were in love, Aaliyah," I said, "and you were drugged. He manipulated you. He preyed on your kindness. That is not stupidity. That is humanity. But I treated you so badly," she sobbed. "I made you sleep in the basement. I let him talk to you like a dog. I am a terrible daughter." I squeezed her hand. "Listen to me. You are the best thing I ever did. You are the only clean thing in my life." I leaned forward, looking deep into her eyes. "This is not your fault, Aaliyah. It is mine." She looked confused. "Yours? How?" "I hid who I was," I said. "I buried the Black Bishop because I wanted you to have a normal father. I wanted you to have a life without violence, without fear, so I became a janitor. I became an old man with a bad knee. I hid my claws, Aaliyah, and because I hid them, the hyenas thought we were food." I looked at my reflection in the dark window. Hunter saw a weak old man and a defenseless woman. If he had known who I really was, he never would have dared to look at you, let alone touch you. My silence invited his cruelty. I tried to be a sheep, and I almost got you eaten. Aaliyah reached up and touched my face. Her fingers traced the scar on my jaw, the lines around my eyes. "You saved me," she whispered. "You came back for me." "I never left," I said. "I was just waiting." She looked at the suit. "Is this who you really are?" she asked. I nodded. "This is who I was, and this is who I must be again. Because I made a promise to your mother. I promised her you would be safe. And I realized tonight that I cannot keep you safe with a mop. I can only keep you safe with a sword." Aaliyah closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay," I asked. "Okay," she repeated, opening her eyes. "I do not want the janitor anymore, Dad. I want my father. I want the man who can stop the monsters." I smiled. It was a genuine smile, the first one in years. "You have him, baby girl. You have him." I kissed her forehead. "Now sleep. We have a lot of work to do when you wake up." "What kind of work?" she asked, her eyes drooping. "We have to rebuild the empire," I said. "And we have to make sure that everyone in this city knows that the King family is off limits. Forever." She nodded, drifting off to sleep. I stayed in the chair watching the monitors, watching the rise and fall of her chest. I felt a peace I hadn't felt in decades. The secret was out. The mask was off. I was Bishop King. I was the Black Bishop. And God help anyone who forgot it again. The 6 months that followed the trial moved with the slow, grinding inevitability of a glacier reshaping the landscape of our lives. While the seasons turned outside the prison walls, inside Stateville Correctional Center, time had stopped for Hunter. The judge had struck the gavel with a force that shattered his future, sentencing him to life without the possibility of parole. His lawyer, a man paid for by his parents' dwindling savings, had tried to argue that Hunter was a victim of circumstance, but the evidence I provided was a mountain of guilt that buried him alive. Now he resides in a concrete box filled with the worst humanity has to offer. He thought he would be a predator in there too. He thought his education and his arrogance would buy him protection, or that he could charm his way into a position of comfort. He was wrong. On his first day in general population, a large man with a spiderweb tattoo on his neck approached him in the yard. The man did not attack him. He simply handed Hunter a bar of soap and a toothbrush and leaned in to whisper 2 words. "Bishop sends his regards." From that moment on, Hunter belonged to them. He was not beaten to death because that would be too merciful and too quick. Instead, he became the lowest creature in the ecosystem. He washed their clothes and cleaned their cells and ate only when they allowed him to eat. I made sure of it. I sent word through the old channels and deposited money into the commissary accounts of the shot callers inside the walls. The message was simple. Keep him alive, but make him wish he was dead. Every morning, Hunter wakes up hoping it is a nightmare, and every morning he realizes the nightmare is real. He writes me letters begging for forgiveness, begging for a transfer, begging for death. I burn them without reading them. His suffering is not my entertainment, it is his penance. He wanted to take my daughter's life, so now he must spend the rest of his own life contemplating the weight of that ambition. He is a ghost haunting a cage of his own making, and I have thrown away the key, ensuring that his arrogance is slowly ground down into dust by the relentless pressure of his new reality. Justice is a circle, and it eventually comes around to everyone who played a part in the tragedy. Hunter's parents, Robert and Martha, had spent their entire retirement fund on his legal defense. They had mortgaged their home, their cars, and their future, believing their son was a victim of a conspiracy I had orchestrated. When the verdict came down, they were left with nothing but shame and debt. The bank foreclosed on their modest suburban home, the same house where they had raised a monster and where they had looked down their noses at me for years, treating me like the hired help. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the sheriff arrived to enforce the eviction. I pulled up to the curb in the Phantom, and Silas opened the door so I could step out, adjusting my cufflinks in the afternoon sun. Robert and Martha were standing on the lawn, surrounded by cardboard boxes, looking old and defeated. They saw me, and their faces twisted with a mixture of anger and fear. "You did this!" Martha shouted, her voice shrill and desperate. "You took our son, and now you are taking our home." I walked up the driveway, my cane tapping a steady rhythm on the concrete. "I did not take your home, Martha," I said calmly. "The bank took your home because you bet on a losing horse. You raised a killer and you bankrupted yourselves trying to defend him. Now you are reaping the harvest." Robert stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. "Get off my property, Bishop. You have no right to be here." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a deed. It was a crisp document stamped with the official seal of the county recorder. "Actually, Robert," I said, unfolding the paper, "I have every right. I bought the note from the bank this morning. This is my property now." Their eyes went wide as they stared at the house they had lived in for 40 years, and then they looked at me, the man they had treated like a servant. "You bought our house," Robert whispered. "Why?" "Because I could," I replied. "And because I wanted to make sure you understood what it feels like to be displaced, what it feels like to be looked at as if you do not belong. I am giving you 1 hour to clear your things off my lawn. After that, I am calling the sanitation department to remove the trash." I turned and walked back to the car, leaving them standing in the ruins of their life. They had created a monster and then tried to protect him, so now they would live in the shadow of his crimes, homeless and humbled by the man they once despised. The sun was setting over the estate, casting long golden shadows across the manicured lawn. I sat on a stone bench in the garden watching Aaliyah. She was kneeling in the flower bed planting hydrangeas, her hands covered in rich, dark soil. She looked healthy. The gray pallor of the poison was gone, replaced by a vibrant glow that spoke of recovery and resilience. Her hair had grown back thick and shiny, and her laughter when she found a worm rang out clear and true. She was no longer the victim. She was the survivor. She had taken over the charitable foundation I had established, using the clean money to help women escape abusive relationships. She was turning her pain into power, just as I had taught her. She looked up and saw me watching her. She smiled, wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "Hey, Dad," she called out. "Do you think we should put the roses over by the trellis?" I stood up and walked over to her, my bad knee protesting only slightly. "I think that is a perfect spot, baby girl," I said. "Roses have thorns. They are beautiful, but they know how to protect themselves, just like us." Aaliyah stood up and hugged me, burying her face in my shoulder. She smelled of earth and sunshine and life. I held her tight, feeling the steady beat of her heart. The heart that Hunter had tried to stop, the heart that was now beating stronger than ever. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." I kissed the top of her head. "You never have to thank me, Aaliyah. It is my job." We walked back toward the house, arm in arm. To the neighbors, I was just a doting grandfather, a retired man enjoying his golden years with his daughter. They saw the gardening tools and the quiet walks. They did not see the security team patrolling the perimeter, invisible in the shadows. They did not see the black sedans that sometimes stopped at the gate to deliver envelopes. They did not know that the Black Bishop was sitting on his throne once more, but the underworld knew. The word had spread through the streets of Chicago like a fever. From the lowest street corner, dealer, to the highest cartel boss, the message was clear. The King family is off limits. You do not look at them. You do not speak to them. And you certainly do not touch them. Because if you do, the old man in the garden will not call the police. He will call the darkness. And when the darkness comes, it does not leave witnesses. I opened the door for my daughter and we stepped inside, leaving the cold world behind us. We were safe. We were together. And for the first time in a long time, I was exactly who I was supposed to be. A father, a protector, a king. The lesson I learned from this nightmare is that true power does not roar, it waits. I spent 20 years believing that burying my past would secure a peaceful future, but I was wrong. Evil does not respect peace, it only respects strength. Hunter mistook my restraint for frailty and my silence for submission, a mistake that cost him his life. We must remember that kindness is a choice, not a weakness. To protect those we love, we must be willing to become the monster that the monsters fear. Sometimes the only way to ensure peace is to be fully prepared for war. If you believe justice was truly served today, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Hunter if he had begged, or did he get exactly what he deserved?